Hey guys, tonight we slip into the sticky glow of 1980s Hong Kong, a place where the city never truly sleeps. The neon lights never stop buzzing, and the streets breathe secrets like steam rising from the gutters. You'll hear the hum of mahjong tiles behind shuttered windows, the clink of dice under trembling hands, and see the flicker of red envelopes passed palm to palm beneath lacquered tables. This is a city balanced delicately between the global and the underground. And at the heart of it all, a man they called Big Spender Chau. Tycoon. Enigma. King of Kowloon's whispers. Some say he owned half the nightclubs without ever signing a lease. Others claim he never touched drugs himself, but 100 boats moved at his signal. If you've ever wanted to know what it looks like when soft shoes tread hard lines, tonight's your night. Just a heads up, you probably wouldn't last 5 minutes in Chau's world. Not because you couldn't play the game, but because by the time you learned the rules, the table would already be on fire. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing where these midnight stories end up. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The city smells like steamed buns and exhaust. It's 1984, and Mongkok is pulsing. Red, green, orange, neon coats every surface like slick paint that never dries. A man walks through it all in slow, deliberate strides. He's not tall, he's not loud, but everyone clears a path like he carries an invisible blade. Chau doesn't speak much when he enters a place. He doesn't need to. The glint of his watch, real gold, real diamonds, no paperwork, says enough. His presence disturbs the rhythm of any room, like a musician who plucks a single string and silences a whole orchestra. A hostess stumbles over her greeting. A dealer fumbles a card. The bartender instinctively switches to the aged bottle. No need to ask. This man is what Hong Kong's tabloids call a shadow investor. The cops know the name, but can't pin a deed to it. Chau's real empire exists in the air between transactions. The pauses in a phone call, the nod before a decision. It's invisible, until it isn't. To the public, Chau is the face you see on page 6 beside a girl who's half his age and twice as ambitious. To the underworld, he's a bridge between tradition and tech, the kind of man who'll toast Bai Ju at a triad feast, then fax instructions to Macau before dessert. The nickname, Big Spender, started as a joke. It stuck because no one ever saw him repeat an outfit, not even his shoes. Tailors knew his wrist measurements better than his own doctor, and yet no one could say exactly what he did, or more importantly, what he didn't. Tonight, he's walking into a room he technically doesn't own, but he owns everyone inside. A club in Tsim converted from a tea house that served opium behind its rice paper walls back in the colonial days. Now, there's velvet on the seats, and silent men with jackets too thick for this humidity linger near the doors. Their earpieces aren't connected to anything. They don't need to be. Their job is to stare, that's all. At the back, a man in a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves is counting chips. His hands tremble slightly, partly because of the money, partly because he knows Chau just walked in. He doesn't look up. He doesn't have to. The air shifted, like it always does when Chau's involved. And Chau says nothing. He taps the table once. The man looks up. Chau raises an eyebrow. The man nods. That's it. $250,000 Hong Kong dollars just changed directions. That's how Chau works. He doesn't bark orders or threaten loudly. He just appears, observes, and leaves the kind of silence that feels like a warning. His empire isn't made of bricks. It's built from uncertainty, fear, and precision. Many people still think that if you trace the sudden spike in luxury watch imports into Hong Kong during the mid-'80s, you'd find Chau's fingerprints all over it, sometimes literally. But no record shows him ever owning a storefront. So what do you think? Coincidence or choreography? Outside, a police cruiser rolls slowly past. The officers glance inside but don't stop, not because they don't care, but because their sergeant's niece is getting married next month. And guess who just offered to sponsor the entire banquet? Hong Kong during this era is complicated. British governance is still in place, but Beijing looms on the horizon like a dragon behind the fog. Everyone's making side deals. Everyone's preparing for the handover in '97. And Chau? Chau's already 2 moves ahead, investing in Macau, whispering to bankers in Geneva, smuggling favors through smiles. There's something oddly modern about the way he operates. Unlike the old-school triad bosses with dragon tattoos and bamboo swords, Chau wears cufflinks. He studies spreadsheets. He knows the names of Swiss watchmakers and Vietnamese border guards. His currency is discretion, and tonight, he'll leave this club just as quietly as he entered. He'll slip into a car with windows darker than the Kowloon night and disappear into the maze of towers, temples, and tenements. And no one will know where he goes next. But that's how legends stay legends. Before the gold watches, before the velvet banquets and briefcases exchanged without words, Chau was just a boy, and not a particularly lucky one. He's born somewhere in the gut of Kowloon walled city, an impossible place that feels made up now, like a dream you once had about buildings stacked like books, wires looping between windows like spiderwebs, and stairwells that led both everywhere and nowhere. If you zoomed out, it looked like a single rotting tooth in the jaw of the city. But zoom in, and every crack had a name. Every balcony held a story. And Chau started in the narrowest room of them all. His family shares a unit the size of a parking spot. 5 people sleeping across wooden pallets and mismatched mattresses. His mother sells boiled peanuts in packets twisted shut with old rubber bands. His father, when he's around, is a sometimes mechanic, sometimes gambler, full-time shadow. Chau learns not to wait up. There's a moment he never forgets. He's 7, crouching under a market stall to stay dry during a summer rain, his stomach gnawing at itself. A vendor flicks him a fishball on a skewer, not out of kindness, but because she's scared he might steal one if she doesn't. Chau thanks her anyway. That's the moment he understands the first rule of survival. If they fear you just enough, they'll feed you without making a scene. The walled city isn't officially on the map. Even the post office pretends it's just a very unfortunate architectural accident. Police don't enter unless they absolutely have to, and when they do, they move in pairs. It's a place governed not by laws, but by consensus. And the consensus is, don't get in anyone's way. And don't ask why the noodle shop on the corner smells like paint thinner after dark. Chau fits in like mold on damp brick. Small, quiet, always watching. He learns to read people long before he learns to read characters. A quick glance tells him who's afraid, who's pretending not to be, and who's going to get robbed tonight. He doesn't smile much, doesn't speak unless spoken to. But if you watch closely, you'll see the way his eyes linger on a deal, the way his fingers twitch near a coin toss, the way he already calculates outcomes like a man 10 years older. Many people still think that, even as a boy, Chau ran errands for low-level 14K lieutenants. Some claim he was nothing more than a lookout with a sharp whistle and fast legs. Others insist he once helped smuggle rare turtles through the sewage tunnels because someone was paying top dollar for them in Macau. So what do you think? Street myth or quiet resume? He doesn't go to school much. Officially, he's enrolled. Uniform hangs on a rusted hook near the door. But he shows up only when he needs to avoid suspicion. Teachers remember him mostly by absence, except for one, Mr. Lamb, who catches him fixing the class lottery box with a piece of string and a magnet. Lam doesn't punish him. He just calls Chau in after class and offers a cup of warm soy milk. "You're smart," Lam says, "but smart gets eaten if it doesn't get careful." Chau never forgets that either. By the time he's 10, he's running errands not just for food stalls, but for backroom dens with no names and curtain doors. Men with missing fingers nod at him as he passes. He knows which corner to deliver envelopes to, which one to avoid if a red flag is draped from a window. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't need to. That's how you learn in Kowloon, by proximity. If you're near the right people long enough, their habits bleed into yours. Chau starts carrying himself differently. He doesn't fidget, doesn't walk too fast, always lets others speak first. And slowly, people stop calling him the errand kid. They start calling him just Chau. By 13, he's outgrown the alleys, not in size, but in vision. He's restless. The petty trades bore him now. He wants more than just passing envelopes. He wants to own the people who pass them. One day, while delivering tea to a corner unit disguised as a dentist's office, he watches two men argue over a card game. They're loud, sloppy, distracted. One of them accuses the other of cheating, and in the moment's chaos, Chau leans in, not to grab chips, not to pocket bills. He takes the discarded cards, studies the patterns, the hands they build. And when one man throws a punch, Chau quietly places a perfect full house in front of the empty seat and walks away without a word. He doesn't know it yet, but he's just taken his first bet. Not on money, but on perception. Days later, the winner finds him and hands him a red envelope. Inside, $1,000. Hong Kong, not Monopoly paper. The message is simple. If you ever see a fix like that again, tell me first. Chau doesn't smile when he takes it. He just nods once. The man walks away with a shiver. Historical fact? By the 1980s, the Kowloon walled city housed over 30,000 residents in just 6.4 acres, making it one of the most densely populated places on Earth. It was a maze of vertical chaos, but also of informal order. Entire dental clinics operated without licenses, schools, noodle shops, gambling rooms. If it existed outside the law, it probably had a space in Kowloon. And within this maze, Chau grew into something sharper. He starts experimenting with tiny hustles, folding fake lottery tickets with lucky numbers, setting up two-card Monte on rooftops, and trading counterfeit Japanese watches to foreign sailors on leave. He rarely speaks. His charm is his silence, and his refusal to flinch when caught. That unshakable calm would serve him well. In the years to come, it would be the thing most people remembered. That he never panicked, never raised his voice. Even when blood was on the table, there's a story, possibly true, of a moment when Chau was chased by two teens trying to rob him. Instead of running, he turned down a dead-end alley, slowed to a walk, and waited. When they caught up, they hesitated. He didn't flinch, didn't run, just stared. One of the boys said, "He looked like he wanted us to be scared." They left empty-handed, because sometimes fear isn't in the action. It's in the stillness. By the time most boys are worried about midterms or first crushes, Chau is already perfecting the flick of a die and the shuffling of marked cards. The air in his part of Kowloon always smells faintly of soy, sweat, and second chances. But Chau isn't interested in second chances. He's here for control. There's a place above the dumpling shop, unofficial, unlisted, and always thick with cigarette smoke, where men twice his age gamble on games they pretend to understand. They laugh too loudly, bet too much, and notice too late that the house always wins. And sometimes the house is run by a boy who never says more than 5 words a night. That's Chau. 14, and already adjusting the tension on loaded dice in his pocket, counting cards faster than his fingers can move, and watching the expressions of men whose lives are collapsing between hands of big two. He isn't gambling for money. He's gambling for faces, for reactions, for weak spots he can exploit later. His reputation grows, not because he's flashy, but because he never loses without reason. And when he wins, he does it like a whisper. One evening, a man named Locke tries to cheat him. A known hustler from Sham Shui Po, Locke swaps decks mid-hand with a move so smooth it's practically ballet. Chau lets him win the round, lets him laugh and take the pot. Then, as Locke reaches for the next hand, Chau calmly says, "Nice switch, left sleeve." Locke freezes. The table goes quiet. Chau doesn't call for a fight, doesn't demand his money back. He simply gathers his coat, nods once, and leaves. 3 days later, Locke's apartment is broken into. Not ransacked, not robbed. Just quietly, thoroughly searched. Someone leaves a single dice on his pillow. Nothing else is taken. Locke moves to Shenzhen the next week. That's how rumors start. And Chau likes rumors more than headlines. Mainstream historical fact. In the 1980s, Hong Kong was a financial miracle, rising rapidly into global prominence. But while skyscrapers bloomed and British influence remained strong, vast swathes of informal economy thrived just beneath the surface. Illegal gambling was rampant, especially in the working-class districts, where police enforcement was sporadic and often corrupted. And it's in that fertile in-between, the blurred space between law and necessity, that Chau finds his footing. He's never violent, at least, not directly. Instead, he cultivates an air of invincibility that protects him better than bodyguards ever could. If someone asks what Chau does, no one answers the same way twice. He fixes games. He buys information. He owns people. Maybe all of it is true. Maybe none of it is. At 15, Chau makes a decision that sets his path. He stops playing cards with people and starts arranging games for them. It's a subtle shift, but it's everything. No more relying on his own luck. No more odds to beat. He becomes the facilitator, the shadow behind the table. The rake from each game, the quiet cut, is his, and no one argues. Because his games run smooth, fast, clean. No police, no fights. Just losses, smiles, and whispered regrets. His first real setup is in the back of a pharmacy that never seems to sell much medicine. The games run on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Limited seats. Invite only. Losers are offered complimentary soup dumplings because Chau knows it's easier to stomach a loss when your mouth is full. One night, a police sergeant shows up in plain clothes. He's polite, even jovial. Chau offers him tea, no questions asked. The sergeant plays 3 hands, loses 2, and leaves with a red envelope that mysteriously appears in his jacket pocket. The message is understood. This game doesn't want trouble, and it pays better than any bust would. That moment, small as it is a pivot. Because now, Chau has protection. Not just from the gangsters, but from the people who are supposed to keep order. From then on, his name starts to carry weight. Shopkeepers know him by face. Taxi drivers never charge him. Teenagers mimic his walk, his way of folding bills, the way he wears a watch on the inside of his wrist, as if time itself is something he'd rather keep to himself. There's another trick he learns: how to show wealth without inviting envy. He dresses well, but never too well. He eats richly, but never flashes food in public. The only real giveaway is his shoes. Always new, always spotless. People start to say, if you want to know how Chau's doing, look at his shoes. Many people still think that Chau rigged Hong Kong's first digital dice machine, a prototype imported from Japan that was meant to end cheating forever. Weeks after its unveiling in a high-end gambling club, it mysteriously malfunctions and rolls 4 sixes in a row, twice. Some say Chau had a hand in that failure. Others claim it was just a coincidence. So what do you think? At 16, Chau gets his first serious offer from someone in the 14K triad. Not a street-level thug, but a mid-level lieutenant who sees in Chau a tool sharper than any knife. The man offers protection, territory, even a small cut of drug profits if Chau will come under the triad's umbrella. Chau listens, nods, smiles, but doesn't answer right away. Instead, he goes home, eats dinner with his mother, and spends the evening polishing his dice. The next morning, he returns with an answer. I don't need protection. I am protection. It's not arrogance. It's accuracy. He's already built a web the size of a district. One call from Chau and 30 gamblers vanish for a week. One raised eyebrow, and a delivery truck ends up with 2 missing crates and no paperwork. He isn't a soldier, he's a weather system. The lieutenant laughs, but there's tension beneath it. You've got confidence, boy, he says. Chau nods. I've got options, he replies. That conversation, brief as it is, marks a turning point. Because Chau doesn't refuse the triad. He simply doesn't submit, and that's rare enough to be respected. By the time he's 17, the games he runs involve 5-figure stakes. Bankers, customs officials, nightclub owners, all pass through his dens, their secrets tucked into their sleeves, and their regrets folded neatly into his pockets. And yet, Chau remains almost invisible to the press, to the police, even to the wider underworld. He's still just that quiet kid who runs cards. But inside the city's shifting power structures, he's building something weightless, paperless, permanent, all without ever raising his voice. Chau is 18 when it finally happens. A single punch, a busted lip, a broken moment in an otherwise spotless reputation. It's late, and he's wrapping up a small private game on the rooftop of a noodle shop when a new player, young, loud, and drunk off imported whiskey, throws a chair, claims the cards are marked, slurs something about being cheated by a kid with soft hands. The room freezes. The other players, all older, all more powerful, exchange nervous glances. This isn't supposed to happen at Chau's tables, ever. Chau doesn't flinch. He doesn't rise. Just sits there, gently fanning the cards back into a neat stack. Then he looks up, calmly, coldly, and says, "You came in with nothing. You'll leave with less." The kid lunges. What follows is messy, sudden, and oddly silent. No screams, no threats, just the sound of fists and furniture, until 2 of Chau's quietest associates pull the boy away and toss him into the alley like a sack of rice. He's not seriously hurt, but his ego is destroyed. He doesn't come back, and that's how Chau first draws blood. Not with a blade, not with bullets, but by allowing violence just once, under his roof, under his name. The incident spreads fast, but not as a stain. It becomes legend, because now everyone knows Chau isn't just composed, he's dangerous if necessary. The myth gets an edge. It's around this time he draws the attention of someone far more dangerous than any rooftop gambler, a 14K enforcer named Uncle Yu. A man in his 50s with a face like weathered leather and a habit of showing up precisely when you wish he wouldn't. Uncle Yu doesn't knock. He arrives at Chau's corner game in Yau Ma Te uninvited. Watches silently for 3 full hours, arms crossed, chewing on a toothpick like he's sizing up a coffin. When the game ends, Chau stands, smooths his sleeves, and bows slightly, not too low, not too quick. "Uncle Yu," he says, "you honor me." Yu just grunts and says, "You shuffle good, but do you bleed for 14K? It's not a question. It's an offer." Chau doesn't answer right away. He invites Yu to tea. They sit at a corner table in a cha-chan ting as waitresses avoid eye contact. Yu sips milk tea. Chau sips silence. "Here's the thing," Yu finally says. "You're not ours, but you're in our streets. You don't wear the ring, but your name gets weight. That makes people confused, and confusion breeds accidents." Chau nods. "Then let's make things clearer." He opens his jacket, takes out an envelope, and slides it across the table. Inside, detailed financial records, a list of games, rake percentages, bribes already paid, and most importantly, names. Powerful names. "Insurance," Chau says, "for both of us." Yu laughs, loudly. Not because it's funny, but because it's bold. "You're not even scared," he says. "I just don't like cleaning up messes I didn't cause." That's the moment it shifts. Chau doesn't get initiated into the 14K in the traditional way. No ritual, no oaths, no chicken blood on old scrolls. Instead, he becomes something more useful, a civilian affiliate, a ghost shareholder, someone they don't have to protect, but still benefit from. Historical detail. In triad hierarchies, there were always individuals who operated outside formal ranks. Businessmen, facilitators, corrupt officials, people who weren't sworn brothers, but held influence. These unofficial members were often more dangerous, precisely because they weren't bound by codes. From that day forward, Chau gains access, not muscle, not territory, names. He starts getting calls from mid-level bosses asking for favors. "Can you make this guy disappear for a week? Can you host a game for this politician's nephew? Can you arrange a fake loss for a sore winner?" And Chau always delivers. Quietly, cleanly, he shifts again from game runner to fixer. He arranges bailouts for gamblers who are too important to fail. He brokers peace between feuding crews over abalone soup and brandy. He orchestrates backroom apologies between rivals where no one speaks the real offense out loud, but everyone knows what was said. And his favorite tool? Information. He starts collecting secrets like jade pendants, gently, lovingly, and for future leverage. He knows who's sleeping with whom, whose business is a front, which inspector's son has a coke habit, and where the money really goes after midnight. Many people still think Chau had an informant inside the ICAC, the Independent Commission Against Corruption. Some even say he once threw a birthday party for a retired investigator's niece, complete with a cake shaped like a safe. So, what do you think? Just good manners, or strategic generosity? Despite his growing influence, Chau remains quiet. You won't find him dancing in VIP lounges or posing for tabloids. Instead, you'll find him where decisions are made. Small tea houses, borrowed offices, mahjong parlors that close for renovations when he walks in. His attire evolves too. Gone are the fake watches, the loud shirts. Now it's tailored jackets, subtle embroidery, imported shoes with soles that don't squeak. He carries a silver pen, never a phone. His pockets are always empty, yet somehow he's never without money. He begins to develop rules, unspoken but deeply felt. Rule 1, never explain yourself. Rule 2, never owe anyone too much. Rule 3, never do anything in a hurry, unless everyone else is panicking. These rules serve him well, especially when the first real test of loyalty arrives. One of his oldest runners, Lee, gets picked up by the police. Not for gambling, but for trafficking in stolen electronics, something Chau explicitly forbade. The cops push Lee hard, threaten time, offer deals. And Lee? He talks, but not about Chau. Instead, he blames a rival, fabricates stories, and somehow keeps Chau's name out of every report. He's released on bail, bruised and paranoid, and shows up at Chau's door the next day. I didn't say a word, Lee insists. Not one. Chau listens, offers tea, nods, then gestures to a back room. Lee hesitates, but he goes. A minute later, 2 of Chau's men follow. Lee doesn't come back out. It's never confirmed what happens. Some say Chau had him shipped to Macau with a new identity. Others say the harbor swallowed him. Chau never mentions Lee again, not even when asked. And that's how he earns his 4th title. Cleaner, because when you work with Chau, there's no warning, no second strike. Just calm and consequence. It's raining the night Chau makes his first real fortune. Not a pocket full of notes, not a tidy rake from a rigged game, but a deal that earns him more in one night than most street bosses make in a year. And it all begins with a counterfeit Rolex. Well, technically, 3 counterfeit Rolexes, bought in bulk from a mainlander with a box full of dreams and a bag full of factory seconds. The man sells them fast, cash only, and disappears into the fairy mist before anyone can ask if the second hand ticks or glides. Chau doesn't wear them himself. That's not the point. He finds 3 eager buyers, one a corrupt shipping manager, one a mid-tier fence trying to impress a girl, and the third, a retired customs officer with a weakness for status symbols and weak whiskey. All 3 know, deep down, they're being sold fakes. But Chau's magic is making people want to believe in a lie if it shines brightly enough. And he does more than sell. He packages a velvet case, a handwritten card in French, an imported receipt. It's not a watch, it's a story. And people love stories more than timepieces. That single play nets him close to 200,000 Hong Kong dollars. But the real prize? Not the money. It's the whispers that follow. Chau's got connections in Switzerland. Chau's clients don't even ask for warranty. If it's expensive and confusing, Chau can find it. Now the door is open. He begins dabbling in luxuries. Fake gold chains so heavy they dent tabletops. Designer handbags with spelling mistakes so subtle they feel like inside jokes. And always with the perfect cover. Limited stock, no refunds, word of mouth only. Historical fact. The 1980s marked a golden era for counterfeits in East Asia, with Hong Kong as a major hub. From watches to designer clothes, the city's markets flourished with high-quality imitations, often sold under the table or out of briefcases by men who never gave the same name twice. But Chau doesn't want to be a hawker. He wants leverage. So, instead of scaling up street sales, he makes a shift. He sells to sellers, middlemen, boutiques who need overflow stock, pawn shops that want to sweeten their windows, club promoters looking for flashy giveaways. He becomes the supplier who never reveals his source. And in a city obsessed with image, he becomes essential. It's around this time that one of his closest associates, Benny, comes into the picture. Benny's loud where Chau is quiet, wears aviators at night, greases his hair too far back, and talks like a man constantly trying to sell you a movie ticket. But Benny has one gift. He can make anything sound legal. Together, they form a simple operation. Benny does the talking. Chau does the arranging. They never sign papers, never sit at the same restaurant twice. If they use phones, they use public ones. And even then, they speak in metaphors. The fish are ready for market. The jackets fit tight this week. It's ridiculous and effective. One day, Benny calls Chau in a panic. "We've got a problem," he says. Chau sips tea. "Which kind?" "Big kind. The gold chains from last week. One of them turned green on a government guy's neck." Chau pauses. "Which government?" Benny gulps. "Housing department." Chau raises an eyebrow. "Not customs?" "No." "Then it's not a problem." Benny exhales, because that's Chau's approach. Prioritize the fire that's actually burning. The rest, let them smoke. Many people still think Chau once sold a fake antique jade ring to a member of the Legislative Council as a wedding gift. Supposedly, it turned out to be dyed soapstone. When confronted, Chau offered a quiet apology and replaced it with a real jade ring, with a listening device embedded inside. So what do you think? Embarrassment turned asset, or just a well-timed joke? He's moving up now. The Rolex hustle was just an appetizer. The real entree comes through a contact in the 14K who owns a warehouse in Kwun Tong, technically empty, officially condemned, but very much in use. There, Chau starts storing higher-value goods, fake luxury perfumes, pirated cassette tapes, knockoff sneakers that look so real even the brands can't tell the difference. But the masterpiece? A deal with a mainland producer to create near-perfect replicas of Western liquor. Not just any bottle. Top Shelf, Chivas Regal, Remy Martin, Glenfiddich. He pays for genuine empty bottles, refills them with high-end local spirits, and reseals them with heat guns and custom foil caps. Then he distributes them to clubs, parties, weddings, places where no one ever checks the label, just the clout. The margins? Insane. The risks? Higher than ever, which is why Chau invests in people, not just guards or drivers, but relationships. He pays rent for a low-level customs official's mother, buys tuition for a border cop's nephew, sends mooncakes to people he's never met, with cash baked inside. Nothing says, "Remember me," like a dessert that can pay your light bill. He's not flashy, though. Not yet. The nickname Big Spender hasn't arrived. At this point, he's just efficient, precise, and so deeply entangled in networks that if you pull one thread, 10 more shift quietly in the dark. And then comes the day he meets the buyer. Not his name, of course, just the title people whisper. The buyer deals only in bulk. No conversation under $1 million. No handshakes without background checks. But somehow, through 2 layers of referrals and 1 fake bakery in Causeway Bay, Chau gets a meeting. They meet in a karaoke room. Chau arrives on time. The buyer arrives late. Orders fruit. Doesn't eat it. Speaks softly, but with weight. "You come highly recommended," the buyer says. "I don't recommend myself," Chau replies. "I deliver." There's a pause, a test. The buyer slides over a briefcase. Inside, samples. 2 watches, a fake Cartier lighter, and a bottle of scotch that's almost right. "Improve this?" the buyer says. "And I'll order 200. Chau studies the bottle. Nods. 3 weeks. He leaves without touching the fruit. That order turns into 10, then 20. And with each delivery, Chau's operation swells, quietly, steadily, like smoke beneath a locked door. He doesn't celebrate, doesn't upgrade his apartment. But he does buy his mother a new rice cooker. Stainless steel, Japanese, with a warming function. She never asks where it came from, and Chau never offers. By the time Chau turns 20, he's a walking contradiction. Always present, rarely seen. He's not the loudest in the room, but every room seems to shift when he enters. He still doesn't drive, yet he's got access to more cars than a dealership. He has no office, no staff on payroll, no listed assets, but somehow everyone works for him. The nickname Big Spender doesn't come from how he dresses. His suits remain simple, tailored, quiet. It doesn't come from casinos. He's rarely spotted playing, and if he does, he walks away early. No, it comes from the ritual of it. The way he tips, the way he orders 4 meals and eats 1, the way he gives red envelopes without occasion and never waits for gratitude. One night, he attends a wedding banquet in Mongkok, a cousin of a friend of a driver who once delivered dumplings to his flat. Chau isn't even on the guest list, but when he arrives, the entire seating arrangement changes. A new table is set. A fresh fish is brought out. The groom thanks him like a CEO greeting an investor. At the end of the night, Chau hands the groom a red envelope. No one sees what's inside, but the rumor spreads fast. 2 months' rent, in cash, neatly folded and sealed with gold-stamped paper. No words, no selfie, just an impression. And that's when someone, no one remembers who, calls him Big Spender, not in mockery, in awe. It sticks, because Chau doesn't spend to flaunt. He spends to remind. Money is just another tool, and he wields it like a scalpel, precise, silent, and often before anyone knows they've been cut. By now, he's operating several fronts. There's the mahjong parlor that opens at 2 a.m. and closes before breakfast. There's a karaoke lounge with no karaoke machine, just booths, phones, and girls who speak 5 languages. There's a noodle shop that makes exactly 0 profit but still stays open, night after night. Everything is layered. A shipment of instant noodles contains 10 cases of Swiss watches. A karaoke hostess doubles as a courier. A cleaning service launders more than uniforms, and yet Chau himself remains barely visible. No photos, no press. If you Google him now, you'd find nothing. Maybe a blurry background face in a photo of a district official opening a seafood market in 1986. Maybe. Many people still think Chau had multiple IDs under names like Li Ho Yin and Chen Ming. One legend claims he had an Indonesian passport before he ever owned a television. So what do you think? Man of many names, or just another urban ghost? The 14K leadership begins to notice, not because he's loud, but because their men keep ending up in his clubs. Their collectors are borrowing from his contacts. Their own lieutenants start bringing up Chau's name during meetings. This catches the attention of one man in particular, Mr. Sung, a high-ranking 14K figure with slicked-back hair, a scar under his right eye, and a smile that doesn't quite reach his pupils. Sung is old school, believes in rituals, loyalty, and messages carved into wood. He invites Chau to dinner, not a request, a command. Chau shows up alone. They meet in a dim Cantonese restaurant in Shengwan. No menu, just fish that still twitches on the plate. You've got charm, Sung says, sipping warm tea. But charm doesn't run streets. Chau nods. Neither does violence. A beat passes. Sung raises an eyebrow. So what does? Memory, Chau replies. People remember how you made them feel. Sung chuckles. And how do you make me feel? Respected, Chau says. Because I showed up. And just like that, Sung's test is passed. He doesn't embrace Chau, doesn't induct him formally, but he gives the nod. The kind that means, you're allowed. For now. From that moment, Chau's ascent accelerates. He starts diversifying. No longer just fake goods and gambling. Now it's favors, high-level ones. Need a visa processed quietly? Chau knows someone. Want to smuggle jade across the border without getting taxed? Chau has a truck. Looking to invest dirty money into something that smells legal? Chau knows 3 apartment buildings and a dying cousin with a clean record. This is where his empire shifts from street level to citywide. He moves into art, not because he loves it, but because it launders well. He buys 2 original ink paintings from a failing gallery, sells them at auction 6 months later for triple the price, and walks away with clean, certified profits. And in a city obsessed with surface and status, few things clean money like culture. Historical note: during the 1980s, Hong Kong's real estate and art markets were booming and ripe for financial games. It wasn't uncommon for criminal figures to use shell companies, art auctions, and property sales as vehicles for laundering large sums. Chau becomes fluent in this language, starts dropping phrases like provenance and portfolio diversification in conversations with men who once only cared about turf wars and nightclubs. And the scariest part? He means it. He meets with a British banker, Martin something, with breath like menthol and a laugh like broken glass. They drink overpriced coffee, discuss offshore accounts. The banker doesn't ask where the money comes from. Chau doesn't offer, but within weeks, funds begin moving, discreetly, repeatedly, in amounts just under the radar. Now Chau has assets in 3 currencies, and still no police file, because he doesn't flash, doesn't threaten. He simply exists where other people hesitate. Even the people closest to him notice the change. Benny starts calling him Sir by accident. The club girls no longer flirt. They just wait for eye contact. Taxi drivers drop him off before he speaks. And his mother, still living in the same quiet flat near the harbor, never asks where the envelopes come from. And Chau? He keeps quiet, keeps moving. Because in Hong Kong, legends are like typhoons. They start softly, pull everything into their orbit, then vanish before anyone sees the eye. There's a corner of Sham Shui Po where the lights never really turn off. A stretch of back street cluttered with old radio shops, fortune tellers, and restaurants that double as informal currency exchanges. It's where phones are repaired with wires salvaged from toys, and where every surface seems to sweat oil. That's where Chau perfects one of his quietest talents, selling fear without saying a word. It begins with insurance. Not the kind you get from an office with fluorescent lights and too many chairs. Chau's version is simpler, older, and more effective. A shopkeeper finds an envelope on their counter. Inside, a photo of their storefront and a single playing card. Nothing else. The next morning, 2 teenage boys on a scooter offer to watch the place for a small monthly fee. The shopkeeper agrees. Business continues. Nothing is ever stolen, and quietly, they begin leaving a second baozi in their breakfast order, always wrapped extra warm. Chau never touches a single shop himself. He just sets the rhythm. His runners do the rest. The trick is in not being greedy. He charges less than the other enforcers. He keeps things orderly. He actually provides protection, and word spreads fast. If Chau's boys watch your door, nobody else touches it. Soon entire blocks are under his care. One day, a rival crew, a splinter of 14K with more brawn than brains, tries to muscle in. They threaten a shop that's under Chau's watch, break a window, send a message. The very next day, their van is found upside down in a back alley. No blood, no bodies, just a stack of counterfeit cigarette packs and a note. We see you. No one claims responsibility, but everyone knows. And Chau? He never mentions it. Just sips soup a little longer at lunch. That's the thing about fear. When you control it, you never have to raise your voice. Historical context. Protection rackets were a staple of triad economies throughout 20th century Hong Kong. But in the 1980s, a wave of refined tactics emerged, more psychological than physical. Smart operators like Chau used subtle intimidation and social obligation over direct violence, which drew less police attention and built longer-lasting loyalty. Many people still think Chau based his tactics on colonial policing manuals, allegedly stolen, then translated, then adapted. Others say he just understood people. So what do you think? Cold study or instinctive mastery? By now, Chau's name is quietly feared. He's not on wanted lists. He doesn't show up in police memos. But in the alley language of the city, he's fluent. If something breaks in Mongkok, it doesn't get fixed until someone checks with Chau. If a new gambling den opens, the owner shows up at Chau's door with a red envelope before the first bet is placed. He's not the biggest fish. Not yet. But he's the one everyone swims around, and he knows it. That's why he starts investing in people. Not just workers, but characters. There's Uncle Pang, the ex-watchmaker with a stutter and a safe under his floor. Pang never speaks at meetings, but he handles every drop, every bundle, every watch that isn't what it claims to be. No one knows his real name. Chau never asks. There's Mickey, a hostess who speaks perfect English, Japanese, and enough Cantonese to flirt, threaten, or vanish. She keeps a burner phone in her purse and a lipstick that's actually a USB drive. Chau sends her to meet foreign investors, when charm is more effective than threats. And then there's Da Fei. Big, loud, always hungry, always sweating. Looks like muscle, acts like muscle, but his real gift is memory. He remembers every face, every license plate, every bag that enters a club. Chau calls him his external hard drive. With this team, Chau begins extending reach into places he's never been. Art galleries, jewelry expos, import-export conferences. He never attends himself, but someone who owes him always does. It's at this time that Chau starts building what Benny calls the web. Each string is a person. Each knot is a secret. And at the center, Chau, still, calm, watchful. One particularly sticky strand comes in the form of a hotel manager named Louis, a man with too much debt and too many cameras. Louis lets Chau install his own system on a top-floor suite, just one room permanently reserved under a fake name. It's soundproof, discreet, windowless, used maybe once a month. No one knows what happens there, but every time it's used, a few weeks later, someone important changes their vote on something quiet. A zoning permit, a customs freeze, a grant for a community center no one really needs. Chau's influence isn't in territory, it's in timing. If a cop raids a building 5 minutes too late, Chau probably made a phone call. If a journalist pulls a story last minute, Chau probably smiled at someone's niece during a charity dinner. And still, he keeps it small. No army, no parades, no photos. He believes in density over noise. His mother still doesn't know. Or maybe she does, but she never asks. She just comments on how well his shirts are pressed, how his shoes never look worn. One day, she finds an envelope on her dresser, an all-expenses-paid ticket to Taiwan, 3 nights in a seaside hotel, meals included. She goes, comes back glowing, says nothing. Chau never brings it up, because in his world, everything means something, even silence. Many people still think Chau's secret to success wasn't just what he did, but what he refused to do. He never chased headlines, never left bodies in alleys, never tried to become a public face. So what do you think? Discipline or deeper strategy? He keeps his schedule like a monk, wakes early, walks, eats alone. Reads the paper, not for news, but for names. Every name that appears twice, he underlines. Doesn't matter if it's in the crime blotter or the business section. Patterns matter. Always. At night, he returns to the same rooftop he started on. The games no longer run there. It's too public now. But the view still calms him. Neon fuzz, distant ferries, a skyline that keeps building, brick by blinking brick. He lights a cigarette. Doesn't smoke it, just watches it burn. A boy once crawled through Kowloon alleys with a bag of fish balls. Now, a dozen unlisted phones buzz at his signal. Now, a dozen people sleep more easily or more carefully because of him. He doesn't smile, but he watches, and that's more than enough. There's a narrow alley in Yau Ma Te, wedged between a herbal medicine shop and a travel agency that never books flights. If you follow it past the cracked tiles and the steam curling from kitchen vents, you'll find a red door with no handle. That's where one of Chau's most profitable ventures lives, a casino that officially doesn't exist. From the outside, it looks like a tea house long out of business. Dusty windows, closed shutters, a sign hanging askew that says, "Under renovation" in faded calligraphy. But the second floor? A completely different story. Up a narrow staircase, beyond two plainclothes men who look like they're waiting for a bus, the atmosphere changes entirely. Here, carpets are clean, lights are low, and the air smells like sandalwood and secrets. The dealers wear gloves, the chips are real, and the money flowing through the room each night could fund a university. Chau doesn't run the place himself. That would be far too direct. The operation is listed under a cleaning company, which is owned by a seafood exporter, which is leased through a shell entity registered in Vanuatu. On paper, it's just another property in a city already groaning under the weight of ghost assets. But in truth, it's his, entirely. The Tea House Casino becomes a central node in his growing web. More than just a place to gamble, it becomes a marketplace for whispers. Politicians, off-duty cops, mid-level bank officers, people who should never be in the same room, play together here, watched by mirrored walls and remembered by Chau's staff. Historical fact: illegal gambling dens were rampant in Hong Kong throughout the 1980s. Many operated for years without police interference due to strategic bribes and shifting locations. These dens often fronted as mahjong parlors, herbal pharmacies, or massage shops, making them difficult to track officially. Chau's version, however, was different. He didn't just offer games, he offered discretion. There were no cameras, no names, only rules. Rule 1, no guns. Rule 2, no politics discussed above a whisper. Rule 3, if you lose big, you settle within 48 hours, or you don't come back. Ever. Everyone obeys, because everyone knows. Chau remembers. One night, a wealthy importer loses 6 figures on baccarat. He storms out, angry, loud, making threats. The next morning, he receives a package, no name, no return address. Inside, a full accounting of his debts, including every overdue payment on his warehouses, each detail neatly typed on letterhead from a law firm that doesn't exist. He pays by lunch, and he sends a thank you mango basket 2 days later. That's the game Chau plays. Not chance, but certainty. He isn't in it for the cards. He's in it for the control. One regular, a well-known restaurateur with political ties, once described Chau's casino as a place where luck comes second and memory comes first. And Chau, he prefers it that way. The dealers are all vetted. Former students, failed accountants, ex-police cadets, people with steady hands and quiet mouths. They're trained not just in dealing cards, but in watching. Every flinch, every sweat bead, every sudden interest in the clock gets logged. Not in writing, In memory, many people still think Chau had a system of hand signals embedded in the way the servers poured tea. Some say every sugar cube added to a guest's cup meant something: a warning, a compliment, a note on outstanding debts. So what do you think? Coincidence or code? The casino isn't open every night. That would be too greedy. It opens irregularly, by invitation, like a seasonal flower that only blooms when the weather feels right. This unpredictability builds allure. People wait for the invitation, obsess over it. Some say the games feel better when they're scarce, and when they do open, Chau always walks through. Never stays long, never plays, just appears. Maybe orders tea, maybe nods at a dealer, then disappears. And his absence, somehow, is louder than his presence. But while the casino grows, so does the danger. There's a rise in street-level raids. New cops on the force. Some aren't taking bribes. Others are playing multiple sides. One night, Chau gets a quiet knock at his office in disguise. A simple apartment above a noodle shop with nothing but a desk, 2 chairs, and a view of a power line. It's Benny, pale and out of breath. "They're asking about you," he says. "Who?" "The ones we can't pay." Chau doesn't blink, just reaches for his tea. "How close?" he asks. Benny shrugs. "Close enough that I didn't bring my phone." Chau sips slowly. Then it's time we give them something else to chase. The next day, the casino closes for plumbing repairs. A pipe does burst, accidentally, on purpose. The upstairs floor is flooded. The tables are pulled apart. The chips boxed and stored in a fish market freezer 2 districts away. Within 48 hours, every link to the casino vanishes, except for the shell company, which quietly changes hands to a holding group run by a family in Macau with no listed assets, but a suspicious number of seafood imports. Just like that, the casino disappears. But not really. It moves, because Chau's secret isn't in building monuments. It's in making them mobile. Later that week, Benny laughs about it. "You know," he says, "you're like a magician, always ready with the next trick." Chau nods. "No, I just pack light." There's a philosophy in that. Never own what you can rent. Never build what you can fold. And never, ever let your name touch paper unless it's an obituary. By now, Chau is dealing with bigger names. Bankers, smugglers, even a pair of Filipino businessmen who seem to know far too much about Macau's licensing laws. The stakes are higher, the conversations slower, the smiles tighter. But he keeps steady, because even with all the smoke, all the mirrors, one thing is always true. Everyone wants something. And Chau? He's very good at delivering. Just enough. He never makes people whole. Just slightly more complete than they were. And in that sliver of improvement, he buys everything. Loyalty, silence, control. One night, as the city buzzes below and the harbor blinks in quiet rhythm, Chau sits alone in a shuttered tea house that no longer serves tea. He lights incense, places a coin on the table, and breathes. He remembers the smell of fish balls, the scrape of coins, the weight of a fake Rolex in a borrowed jacket, and he smiles, not because he's happy, but because the house always wins, especially when it's built on stories. There's a warehouse near the docks in Suen Wan, forgotten by the shipping companies, hidden behind a facade of broken crates and rusted signage that claims it stores medical supplies. Inside, the air is damp and sweet, tinged with a scent that doesn't match the outside world. Dried mangoes, incense, and faintly, the bitter aroma of poppy seeds. This is where Chau experiments with a different kind of game. Not cards, not dice. Opium, he doesn't like it. Not the product, not the business, not the stink it leaves on a man's conscience. But Chau doesn't run on personal preference. He runs on demand. And in the late 1980s, there's demand aplenty. especially from Vietnam, parts of southern China, and a handful of quiet cities in Australia where tradition still runs deeper than regulation. It begins with a single crate hidden inside a shipment of carved wood elephants, then another tucked behind fake tea tins, and eventually a full shipment that looks, to customs, like nothing but cheap mahjong sets wrapped in tar-stained plastic. But inside, poppy tar boiled and pressed into bricks, sealed in wax and masked with herbs strong enough to confuse a dog. Chau doesn't handle the stuff directly, never touches a crate, never even walks into the room where it's stored. But he coordinates. A whisper here, a red envelope there, and a shipment slips through, like mist under a locked door. Historical fact. While Hong Kong's triads were publicly associated with gambling and extortion, many also trafficked in heroin and opium, particularly during the 1970s and 80s. The drugs were often smuggled through cargo routes, concealed in food products, or disguised as traditional medicine shipments. Chau is too modern for heroin dens and sweating addicts. That's not his world. But the money from the opium routes? It flows like a river, quiet, deep, and untraceable. So long as the shipment stays small and the paperwork stays fake, he doesn't keep it all. That would be reckless. Instead, he reinvests in his favorite resource, people. The first is Mr. Choi, a former chemist turned tea merchant. Choi knows how to mask scents, how to manipulate weight, and most importantly, how to disappear. He becomes Chau's alchemist, not of drugs, but of disguises. Next is Mei Lin, a mainland logistics expert who once managed a textile factory in Shenzhen before a labor dispute forced her out. She now runs Chau's cross-border schedules with the precision of a military clock. No shipment moves unless Mei Lin approves, and perhaps most crucially, there's Bo, an ex-Marine police officer with bad knees and good memory. Bo knows every dock, every guard shift, and every loophole in the paperwork. He's on Chau's payroll now, lives in a small flat paid for in cash, drinks oolong tea, and feeds pigeons when he's not rerouting shipping manifests. Together, this trio helps Chau build a network that stretches beyond Hong Kong's neon glow, into Macau, into Guangdong, even nudging toward the gray zones of Malaysia. But the opium business, profitable as it is, never becomes Chau's mainstay. He treats it like dynamite, useful in small doses, fatal in the wrong hands. He refuses to expand, refuses to let it become what defines him, because Chau understands the city's rhythm better than most. And in Hong Kong, excess is always punished. Loud people disappear, greedy people get sloppy, and drug lords, they end up on Interpol lists. He's not interested in that kind of fame, so he pivots, quietly. The money from opium is used to buy into a new venture, real estate on paper. Many people still think that Chau's most brilliant move was converting drug money into offshore property stakes using retirement accounts from fake employees. Some say he once created an entire factory's worth of fake staff, funneled payroll into shell companies, and bought 2 Macau storefronts through a widow who believed she was running a charity. So what do you think? Exploitation or entrepreneurial genius? The properties become his clean reservoirs. Rent flows in. Taxes are paid. Lawyers, real ones, sign off on the leases. And no one ever suspects the seed money came wrapped in mango crates and washed through tea tins. Meanwhile, the underworld begins to notice that Chau no longer walks. He glides. His enemies can't trace him. His allies can't reach him without a scheduled call. Even Benny, his closest friend, starts referring to him as the man behind the curtain. The casino keeps humming. The protection rackets operate without a hitch. But now, Chau is branching out. He funds a nightclub in Central, officially owned by a Canadian-Chinese DJ with a love for old jazz and new money. It becomes a hot spot for foreigners, big drinkers, loud spenders, people who tip in American dollars and leave receipts that don't match their credit cards. Chau visits once, only once. He walks through the club wearing a dark jacket and no jewelry, orders one drink, doesn't finish it, leaves before midnight. The bartender doesn't know who he is, but the manager does. And from that night on, every backroom deal in that club runs through Chau's hands, whether people know it or not. There's a theory that Chau's real empire wasn't built on drugs, gambling, or violence, but on margins. Tiny differences, a percentage here, a shortcut there. Multiply that across a city like Hong Kong, and you've got power. And power is what Chau has now. Even the triad elders stop treating him like a junior. They don't invite him to meetings. They ask if he's available. He's still not a sworn member, but everyone knows he doesn't need to be. Swearing loyalty is for people who need protection. Chau needs nothing. One afternoon, a lieutenant from the 14K tries to test him, demands a cut from a warehouse Chau controls. The next morning, the lieutenant's brother-in-law is pulled in for questioning by ICAC. The next week, his bakery is shut down for fire code violations. The lieutenant retracts his request. He also sends a gift, a gold fountain pen. Chau returns it, but he keeps the box, because everything has a use, even empty containers. By the end of the year, Chau's network is no longer just a criminal web. It's infrastructure. It supports people. It shelters businesses. It funds weddings and settles debts. If something breaks in this city, figuratively or literally, there's a chance Chau is 3 steps away from fixing it. And yet, somehow, he still walks the streets alone. No bodyguards, no drivers, just clean shoes, calm eyes, and a rhythm that doesn't belong to the city, but controls it. By 1986, the name Big Spender Chau isn't whispered anymore. It's murmured with reverence, but not because of a tabloid scandal or a dramatic arrest. No, it's something subtler, something quieter, the kind of fame that doesn't need headlines, the kind that lives in pause-filled conversations and knowing nods across crowded rooms. Chau has evolved. He's no longer a fixer, a hustler, a shadow broker. He's become a spectacle. And his stage? Hong Kong's endless parade of dinners, galas, weddings, wakes, and ribbon cuttings. The ceremonial heartbeat of a city addicted to appearances. He doesn't host them. He attends. Always late. Always the last to leave. At one wedding banquet in Wan Chai, Chau shows up alone, dressed in a slate gray suit with gold cufflinks shaped like coins. He doesn't sit at the front, doesn't speak, just places a red envelope on the gift table, thicker than custom, and disappears before dessert is served. The next morning, the groom's father finds an unsigned note inside. Loyalty is louder than toasts. That story circulates faster than photos, because Chau understands what most gangsters never will. In a city like this, power isn't taken, it's performed. He starts funding lion dances, quietly. Not the showy tourist ones in Simshatsui, but the real ones, clan-funded, centuries old, full of incense and tradition. His name is never spoken aloud during these dances, but the performers always bow slightly deeper when passing a certain table. That table is always empty, except for a gold coin placed exactly at the center. And yet, even as his legend grows, Chau stays small. He keeps the same apartment, a third-floor walk-up with a kitchen barely wide enough for 2. He eats at the same Dai Pai Dong most nights, orders the same soup, tips in silence, because he understands the most crucial rule of all. The more people see you spend, the more they wonder why. So when he does spend big, it hits like thunder. One Lunar New Year, He walks into a wedding jewelry shop in Jordan, orders 10 gold bangles, and asks for each to be engraved with a different virtue: loyalty, patience, discipline, memory, kindness, silence, debt, timing, consequence, and grace. The owner, an old man with shaky hands and even shakier books, asks if they're for a wedding. Chau simply replies, "No, for the city." He gives the bracelets away over the next 6 months. One ends up on the wrist of a senior customs officer's wife. Another is auctioned at a charity fundraiser. 2 are never seen again. Many people still think those 10 bracelets were part of a secret code, markers of trust, or perhaps debt. Others believe they were simply gifts. So what do you think? Strategy or sentiment? Meanwhile, Benny watches all this unfold with both awe and unease. "You know," he says over pork buns one night, "there's a line between mystery and myth. You're standing right on it." Chau doesn't respond, just pushes a red envelope across the table. Benny opens it. Inside is a plane ticket to Singapore, a passport and a new name, and a key. "What's this?" Benny asks. "Plan B," Chau says. "Why now?" Chau sips his tea. "Because we're no longer gamblers. We're targets." He's not wrong. There's a shift happening. New faces in the ICAC. Young, university-trained investigators who don't take bribes and don't play by the old gentleman's rules. They carry tape recorders. They wear glasses. And worse, they read everything. Chau adjusts accordingly. He starts decoupling. No more shared drop points. No more repeated faces. Every courier now has a duplicate. Every transaction has a decoy. His warehouses are suddenly leased by companies with names like Golden Lotus Maritime Holdings and Southeast Urban Laundry Solutions. Harmless. Forgettable. He even sells one of his gambling dens to a priest. A real priest. The priest doesn't know it's fake. Chau pays him in donations, and the paperwork disappears in a sea of charity filings and incense smoke. Because now Chau isn't just avoiding the law, he's outmaneuvering it. He studies the ICAC's annual reports, notes the patterns, the zones they target, the language they use. He learns their playbook, not to play along, but to stay one chapter ahead. One day, a mid-level inspector, eager, smart, too clean for his own safety, approaches a known associate of Chau's with a thinly veiled offer. "Help us, and we'll help you," the officer says. 3 weeks later, that officer is transferred to a desk job in a basement. It's never proven, but a memo misfiled under his name leads to embarrassment, a formal warning, and an apology to a superior who never knew he was being investigated. Chau doesn't even smile when he hears about it. He just folds the newspaper and says, "Sloppy handwriting ruins reputations." Still, the pressure builds. So Chau turns his gaze across the water to Macau. It's the perfect storm. Portuguese governance, looser oversight, and a thriving casino culture built on paper-thin legal frameworks. Everyone is gambling. No one is watching. Chau doesn't move there. That would be too obvious. Instead, he begins visiting. He befriends croupiers, buys drinks for pit bosses, sends mooncakes to minor shareholders, and over time, builds what Benny calls a friendly fortress. It's not about taking over Macau. It's about giving his empire a second door. If Hong Kong gets too hot, he walks, disappears, reinvents. But until then, he continues to spend, strategically, surgically. One day he walks into a boutique and buys 10 identical suits, has them delivered to 10 different addresses, each in a different district, each with a note that simply says, "Wear this when the city forgets how to dress." A joke? A warning? A signal? No one knows, but every recipient shows up at a certain funeral months later, wearing that exact suit. Not one of them says a word, because Chau's generosity is rarely free and always remembered. There's a subtle rhythm to the way Chau moves through the world. He never hurries, never lingers. He's mastered the art of timing, not just in conversation or business, but in life itself. And by late 1986, that timing becomes his most valuable currency, because now the spotlight's getting brighter. He's never been arrested, never subpoenaed, never formally accused of anything. But his name, it starts floating in rooms it shouldn't. Police briefings, legislative whispers, and, most notably, inside a faded government office that deals with economic anomalies. That's when Chau makes his most elegant move yet. He vanishes from the paperwork, not just once, systematically. Over a series of weeks, he sells off nearly all of his holdings, on paper, at least. The noodle shop? Transferred to a cousin who technically doesn't exist. The club in Central? Sold to a Malaysian DJ who mysteriously never visits. His Macau holdings, divided among 4 shell companies, each with directors who died years ago, according to very convincing death certificates. It's not retreat, it's insulation, because Chau knows the truth. In Hong Kong, invisibility isn't about hiding. It's about overwhelming the system with ghosts. He starts living lighter, fewer meetings, fewer calls, more time spent walking near the harbor, alone, like a man who's already retired. But every so often, something small shifts. An envelope delivered, a restaurant closed for renovation, a shipment delayed, and behind each shift, Chau's fingerprint, soft, blurred, unmistakable. Many people still think Chau invented a method of laundering cash through temporary art exhibits. One rumor claims he once funded a one-night-only photography show in an abandoned apartment, sold 3 photos for $500,000 each to anonymous buyers, and then had the gallery bulldozed the next morning. So what do you think? Cultural patron or illusionist? He's not just playing games anymore. He's writing the rules. One such rule: never let a threat be louder than a favor. That's how he begins handling problem clients, not with force, but with grace. Take Mr. Yuan, a loan shark who begins poaching Chau's gamblers, offering higher stakes and looser terms. Loud, cocky, with a cigarette always dangling like punctuation. Chau doesn't confront him. Instead, he sends a gift. A custom suit, tailored, delivered with a note that reads, "For your funeral, hopefully not soon." Yuan wears the suit anyway, stops poaching. And that's how Chau operates now, through gesture, not punishment. He begins investing in time, buys out the debt of a local watch shop, not to flip it, not even to run it, just to control the flow of second hands, the literal passing of time in the city. The symbolism isn't lost on those who know. One evening, Benny visits the shop and finds Chau seated at the back, examining a pocket watch. The kind you'd expect in an old British officer's vest, gold and heavy. "It doesn't tick," Chau says. Benny nods. "So why keep it?" Chau closes the lid, because it still opens. There's poetry in that, quiet and sharp, but not everyone's in tune with his rhythm. New players are rising, young, brash, and armed with pager numbers, imported cars, and dreams of Miami. They don't bow, don't offer tea. They fire guns in public and film themselves counting cash. They don't understand what Chau's built, and worse, they don't care. One of them, a triad hotshot named Danny Fong, calls Chau old-fashioned during an interview with a foreign journalist. Claims the city's future belongs to those who aren't afraid to be seen. A week later, Danny's brand new nightclub burns down. Faulty wiring, they say. Insurance fraud, others whisper. Danny survives, but he leaves Hong Kong a month later, citing health issues. Chau says nothing, but everyone notices that for the next month, he carries a gold Zippo lighter, engraved with the words, "Visibility is flammable." He doesn't use it, just sets it on tables when he talks. and those who see it never interrupt. Historical note: the late 1980s marked a shift in Hong Kong's underworld, where traditional triad codes began clashing with modern criminal opportunism. The older generation favored loyalty, ritual, and discretion. The newer breed prized flash, media, and expansion at all costs. Chau stands between both worlds. He understands the old codes, but he speaks the new language. He begins advising, not running, multiple operations. He becomes a consultant in the criminal sense, asked to arbitrate disputes between crews, trusted to store assets when no one else can, even approached by international players who want eyes in the harbor, but don't trust anyone who uses their real name. And yet Chau remains calm, still walks alone, still eats alone, still carries the same pen, because his empire isn't built on loyalty, it's built on predictability. People know how he'll react, know what to expect. That's power, and it's safer than fear. Still, there are moments of unpredictability. One night, Chau walks into a restaurant he's never visited before, a family-run spot with mismatched tables and greasy menus. He orders fish congee. Nothing special. After he pays, he hands the owner's daughter a red envelope. Not large, not flashy. Inside is a note. Keep the broth cloudy, it hides the rice. No one knows what it means. But a week later, a wealthy investor buys the building next door, and not the restaurant. It stays untouched. The family never learns why, but they keep the envelope, and they keep the broth cloudy. Chau, meanwhile, becomes more elusive. He stops answering calls directly, uses couriers instead, sends notes written in fountain pen. He doesn't retreat. He elevates. His legend shifts from big spender to something more abstract. The man who never repeats a favor. The man who once paid a man to leave a city just to prove he could. The man who tips waiters before ordering. And beneath it all, still the same boy from Kowloon, still watching, still calculating. But now the numbers are global. His assets are spread across 5 countries. His contacts speak 6 languages. And his silence? It's no longer a tactic. It's a signature. By 1987, Chau's silence is doing more talking than most men's entire legacies. He's no longer just a name whispered in club kitchens and backroom mahjong dens. He's a silhouette, a rumor that walks in tailored shoes and exits before the ink dries. But with expansion comes vulnerability. For years, Chau operated in spaces between systems, between gangs, between governments, between regulations. That made him hard to track. But now, as his quiet influence starts brushing up against international borders, the cracks begin to show. Not in his organization, in other people's. It starts with a courier in Manila, intercepted, questioned, and released. Nothing was found, but someone wrote the name Chau in a notebook seized during the search. That alone sends a ripple across the network. Then, a lawyer in Bangkok, who helped launder a set of fake art sales for Chau's holding group, gets caught up in a customs scandal. Again, Chau's name isn't officially mentioned, but a briefcase found in the man's office contained a silver pen, one of Chau's early trademarks. And finally, there's a meeting in Singapore. Nothing more than lunch between 2 businessmen, but one of them is being watched. And when surveillance photos are reviewed, there's Chau, clear as day, sipping tea in the corner. No crimes, no arrests, but now someone is paying attention, and that's all Chau needs to know. So he retreats, not physically, but structurally. He begins unwinding parts of the web, not breaking it, just loosening strands. He stops using certain ports, burns 2 of his courier routes, retires 3 couriers completely, sending them home with severance envelopes thick enough to change a life. One of them opens a ramen stall in Macau. The other vanishes into Thailand. The third No one's sure. Not even Chau, because that's the rule now. Know less, remember less, risk less. It's also the beginning of Chau's next transformation. He starts showing up in public again. Not in gambling halls or midnight dens, but corporate fundraisers. He attends art auctions, sponsors youth poetry contests, donates to hospitals under the name of a shell foundation registered in the Cayman Islands. And for the first time in his career, he starts building a face, a public one. It's calculated, of course, controlled, but real enough to cause confusion. Because while the ICAC and international authorities look for a gangster, Hong Kong society pages begin referring to him as a mysterious benefactor with an eye for forgotten corners. He smiles in one photo, barely. That image, published in a local magazine, becomes a thing of legend. It's clipped out, photocopied, passed around street corners and marble boardrooms alike. Because it confirms two things. He exists, and he's untouchable. Many people still think that Smile was staged, that the photographer was paid, that the magazine's editor had a debt quietly forgiven. Others believe the whole moment was spontaneous. So what do you think? Coincidence or choreography? Meanwhile, Chau begins investing in information like never before. He hires a pair of disgraced journalists, one Cantonese, one American, both brilliant, both broke. They build him a private intelligence brief, daily memos, rumor summaries, watch lists. Chau reads them each morning over pu'er tea. There's a story in one report about a banker's son caught in a Macau casino scam. Chau circles the name and underlines two phrases: loan forgiveness and family reputation. A week later, the banker receives a discreet offer to clear the son's name in exchange for future cooperation. No threats, no photos, just a clean favor. The banker accepts. That's how Chau operates now. Not through control, but through quiet leverage. He's also watching the 14K, because while Chau was expanding outward, the triad was rotting inward. Turf wars, ego clashes, loud public feuds that made headlines for all the wrong reasons. One boss is shot in broad daylight outside a church. Another disappears mid-flight, last seen boarding a plane to Manila. A third is arrested at a brothel that had already been under surveillance for weeks. Chau, untouched, because he doesn't attend meetings. He sends tea, literally. Vacuum-sealed bags of oolong to whichever lieutenant needs calming that week, always accompanied by a handwritten note. Hot water reveals the leaf. Sometimes that's enough to stop a feud. Sometimes it just reminds them who still watches the kettle. Historical fact. During the late 1980s, Hong Kong's triad scene underwent massive internal disruptions. Factions splintered, younger leaders rejected tradition, and police surveillance increased dramatically under pressure from both British and Chinese governments anticipating the 1997 handover. Chau doesn't resist this chaos. He uses it. He begins absorbing the fringes. Not full crews, but the outcasts, drivers, translators, ex-runners, people who no longer trust their bosses, people who prefer quiet competence over loyalty speeches. He offers them something rare: a salary, a task, and silence. One such recruit is a young woman named Joy, fluent in Mandarin and Hokkien, with an uncanny ability to mimic signatures. Within a year, she becomes Chau's document ghost. Another is Tai, a logistics man with one eye and a perfect memory for border schedules. Tai never speaks above a whisper, never shows up twice in the same jacket. With these additions, Chau's machine hums even quieter. He no longer needs to speak directly. His network breathes on its own. Still, there's one problem even he can't silence: his nickname. Big Spender follows him like a shadow wearing sunglasses. It was once useful, flashy, easy to dismiss. But now it draws attention from the wrong people. Reporters, tax auditors, curious heirs, So Chau does something unthinkable. He kills it, stops tipping publicly, stops attending weddings, closes the club in Central, sells the fountain pen. Within months, a new rumor circulates. Big Spender's gone. Some say he was killed. Others say he fled to Canada. A few believe he retired to a fishing village under a false name. And Chau? He lets them talk, because now he has what no one else in the game does. A name without a face. A presence without a pulse. A past without fingerprints. He becomes what he was always meant to be, a man who doesn't exist. And yet, somehow, everyone still owes him something. By 1988, Chau has become the rarest creature in Hong Kong's underworld. A ghost with gravity. He's present in the outcomes of boardroom decisions he never attends, whispered about in clubs he's never set foot in, and blamed, accurately or not, for deals that collapse before anyone sees the ink. His influence isn't direct. It curves around people, like gravity, like weather. And now he's preparing for something bigger. Not more money, not territory. Longevity. He's seen what happens to gangsters who stay too long. They either die behind tinted glass or live just long enough to be photographed in handcuffs. But Chau wants neither. What he's building isn't a syndicate. It's a legacy engine. A system that can run without his name attached, without his voice on the phone, without his face showing up at banquets. To do this, he needs a shell within a shell. He starts forming what he quietly calls the second circle. A hand-picked group of operators, each with their own fronts, none of whom know the entire system. The circle includes a banker in Zurich who thinks he's laundering for a South Korean film investor, a logistics manager in Ho Chi Minh City who believes she's routing for an ex-cargo pilot, a diplomat's cousin in Macau who just thinks he's investing in boutique properties. Each person holds a thread. None know what they're weaving. Only one man, Benny, understands the full scope. And even he doesn't ask too many questions anymore. One night, over shark fin soup and too many toasts, Benny leans in. "This circle of yours," he says, voice slightly hoarse. "What happens if it starts spinning without you?" Chau replies without looking up. Then it's working, because the goal isn't to rule forever. The goal is to disappear with interest. At the same time, Chau starts trimming old connections, not out of fear, but necessity. He stops returning calls from certain 14K lieutenants. No drama, no insult, just distance. If pressed, he says, that was a different chapter. He visits his mother less often, sends gifts instead. Less cash now, more practical things. An imported rice cooker, new reading glasses, a prepaid medical card. She never complains, just tells the neighbors her son is doing something with shipping, which isn't technically a lie, because Chau's newest venture is shipping, more precisely, logistics intelligence, not smuggling, not bribery, just information. Where boats land, who inspects them, which docks are understaffed, which customs officer is distracted on Wednesdays. This data becomes gold. He packages it, sells it to people who don't ask where it came from. Triads, corporations, even one or two government officials from across the border. He's no longer the man who moves things. He's the one who knows where they'll move before they do. Many people still think Chau had access to the port's scheduling database. Some claim it was an inside man. Others say he simply hacked it through a borrowed child's computer at a library. So what do you think? Insider trick or genius-level foresight? One client, a Singaporean businessman with a shaky past, asks Chau if he can guarantee a shipment's passage. Chau replies, "I don't guarantee things. I just adjust the weather, and the shipment arrives. Early. But even weather needs a calm center. And Chau? He's starting to feel the pressure mounting from the winds he set loose. There's an incident. Small, but too close. A courier loses a package. Not drugs, not cash, just documents, but sensitive ones. Names, dates, shipping logs that should never have left a safe. The courier, a 21-year-old named Kit, disappears for 2 days, returns bruised, panicked, begging for mercy. Benny wants to scare him. Chau says no. Instead, Chau sits Kit down, pours tea, waits, then speaks. "Do you know why I never raise my voice?" Kit shakes his head, trembling. Chau leans in. "Because the second I do, you'll know it's too late to run." Kit quits the next morning, but a week later, a different courier, silent, older, cleaner, appears in his place. Same route, same pace, no mistakes. That's how Chau handles failure now. Not with fear, with replacement. He also begins training silence. He funds 3 private English classes, not for himself, for his staff. Because soon, deals will cross borders. People will need to read contracts, understand banking phrases, decode intent. No one brags about it. But the woman who used to sweep floors at his Mongkok tea house is now fluent in legal jargon and can read a profit-loss sheet better than most hedge fund interns. Chau calls her Ms. Lee now, not Auntie, and she calls him Sir, but only in public. At night, Chau still walks, sometimes alone, sometimes with Benny, though they talk less these days. They pass construction sites where glass towers rise like fingers grasping at the sky. Hong Kong is growing fast, its heart beating to the rhythm of finance, speculation, handover fears, and too much imported ambition. One night, Benny asks, "You ever think we'll be remembered?" Chau considers. "I think we'll be repeated." There's something chilling about that, because Chau doesn't want to be a statue or a legend carved into bar walls. He wants to be a shape in behavior, the way a man checks a lock twice, or how someone places an envelope just so on a table, or why an entire club goes quiet when someone enters too confidently. Not a memory, a muscle. He's already seeing it. In other crews, in rival outfits, even in government behavior. The way deals are cut now, fewer meetings, more silence. The way favors are traded, wrapped in birthday gifts, disguised as school donations. They're copying him, poorly, but still. And yet, even as his legend spreads, Chau's circle tightens. He keeps fewer things. Ditches one of his safe houses, closes the watch shop, stops carrying a phone altogether. And one morning, without warning, he walks into the downtown tailor he's used for 10 years and says, "No more suits." The tailor blinks. "Something wrong with the fit?" Chau smiles faintly. "No, I just don't want to be remembered for my shadow." The tailor nods slowly and never speaks of it again. The thing about power, real power, is that it becomes invisible once it's perfectly built. It stops announcing itself, stops shaking rooms. It just is, like temperature, like time. And by 1989, Chau has become that kind of power, not the kind that snaps fingers and topples buildings, but the kind that reroutes a shipment with a phone call no one hears, the kind that keeps entire police districts cautious without issuing a single threat, the kind that makes a customs inspector check twice, then look the other way, not out of fear, but habit. He's woven into the city now. But something else is weaving into him too. The end game. It starts quietly, like most of Chau's major transitions. A simple question, posed during a walk with Benny down Temple Street. "What do you think I'll be doing 10 years from now?" Benny, half distracted, shrugs. "Same thing, only with nicer carpets." Chau doesn't laugh. "No," he says. 10 years from now, I want someone else to be doing it, and I want to be watching, without them knowing. It's not retirement, not exactly. It's subtraction, a controlled disappearance, a vanishing trick that takes years to execute but leaves no gaps behind. To do it, he needs a new kind of asset, not just people, not just properties. He needs stories, So he begins inventing them. He funds 3 small businesses across Kowloon: a bookstore, a dumpling stall, a piano repair shop, all legitimate, all quiet, all run by people who owe him, trust him, or fear him. Usually, all 3. He lets them succeed, not by laundering money through them, but by injecting stability. Rent always paid on time, supplies never short, unexpected grants arriving just before tax deadlines. The rumor spreads. If your business survives 3 winters, Chau might be watching. And so people start behaving better. Vendors start protecting each other. Shopkeepers start offering discounts to neighbors. Because maybe, just maybe, he's watching. And Chau? He watches. Because these stories, these tiny shops, these anonymous triumphs, they're his exit ramp. When people ask about him years from now, they won't talk about drugs or casinos. They'll talk about the dumpling place that never closed during SARS, the bookstore that somehow stayed open during a rent crisis, the piano shop where a retired triad boss taught blind kids to play Chopin. Chau is writing his afterlife, historical context. In the late 80s, Hong Kong's economic boom made it a city of dizzying upward mobility. But beneath the neon glow, small family businesses still formed the social glue of entire districts. Their endurance and sudden closures often told stories of politics, pressure, or protection. Meanwhile, Chau's second circle is fully operational. He's no longer involved in daily logistics. That falls to Mei Lin. He stopped reviewing shipping reports. That's now Ty's domain. Even Benny, for all his closeness, is kept at a deliberate distance now. Their meetings are shorter, less personal. One afternoon, Benny says, "Feels like you're phasing me out." Chau doesn't deny it. "I'm phasing me out. But you built all this." Chau stirs his tea. "And I'm not taking any of it with me." It's not detachment. It's strategy. Because Chau knows something few in his world ever learn. You don't escape your empire by outrunning it. You escape by making it forget you were ever necessary. So he starts rewriting history, his own. He visits an old friend at the city records office. The man owes Chau a favor from decades ago, something involving a gambling debt, a vanished ledger, and a fake diploma. Chau slides a single photo across the table, an old one, faded, from the early casino days. "I want this to go away." The clerk hesitates. "Won't be cheap." "I'm not asking for cheap. I'm asking for forever." 2 weeks later, the photo's negative is gone. The file it came from is accidentally miscategorized. The system auto-archives it under a surname that doesn't exist. And with that, one more fingerprint is erased, another memory replaced with mist. Many people still think Chau had a private team dedicated to scrubbing. Digital traces, registry entries, even whispered reputations. Some claim he funded a poetry magazine just to bury his name on page 12 of an obscure issue, so any online search would bring up verse instead of vice. So what do you think? Paranoia or performance art? Then comes the envelope, delivered by hand, unmarked. Inside, a photo of Chau walking in Macau. Recent, clear. Tucked beside it, a card with a typed message. "You're still interesting. That's a problem." No signature, no threat, just observation. It rattles Benny. It doesn't rattle Chau. He burns the photo over a ceramic bowl, lets the ash settle, and says nothing, because he already expected this. Visibility is the tax of success. He lowers his profile even further, stops eating out, stops visiting familiar routes, switches shoes, sits with his back to walls, stops speaking Cantonese in public, starts using Mandarin, then switches to English, then back, and eventually he leaves. Not dramatically, no tearful farewell, no one-night blowout. He just steps out of his own orbit. One night he tells Benny, "There's a boat, just a short trip. You coming back?" Chau looks at the sky. Eventually, but he doesn't. Not in the way people expect. because he doesn't vanish completely. He flickers, spotted in Singapore, at a jazz bar, older, quieter, ordering neat gin. Seen briefly in Tokyo, walking out of a museum before it even opened. Rumored to have bought a villa outside Naples, under a name borrowed from an old street vendor he once helped during a storm. No confirmations, no addresses, just sightings. And in Hong Kong, the city adjusts. Deals still happen. Ships still move. The second circle still turns. But something's missing. That pause when a certain name is spoken. That quiet gravity. And slowly, new names rise. None last long. None quite fill the chair that Chau never officially sat in. And in a tea house that doesn't serve tea anymore, a table stays reserved, covered in dust. A gold coin still sitting at the center. No one touches it. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Even legends fade if they're left untended. But Chau doesn't fade. He just softens, like fog over the harbor, like the last echo of a bell after midnight. By 1990, his name has become a kind of riddle, too old for the tabloids, too real for fiction, and too complex to be summarized by anyone who wasn't there. There are still stories, of course. New ones every year. A watch dealer in Central claims he once sold Chau a rare Patek Philippe, paid in jade, not cash. A cab driver insists Chau once tipped him an entire stack of casino chips with the instruction, play one hand, leave win or lose. And a girl in Sham Shui Po still tells friends that her university tuition was paid in full by an anonymous donation, signed only with the symbol for patience. But Chau himself? Nowhere. Not gone, just absent. And that absence becomes his signature. People who once feared him now tell stories with a kind of nostalgic awe. Not of gunfights or chases. Chau never trafficked in noise, but of gestures. A raised eyebrow that canceled a deal. A red envelope that ended a feud. A 3-word sentence that changed the fate of a man's whole family. He has at last become what he always intended to be, memory, weaponized. And yet, in the background of this myth, something quieter takes shape. A return of sorts. Not flashy, not obvious, but subtle. A donation to a school in new territories, made in the name of a shipping company that hasn't operated since 1983. A letter sent anonymously to a dying journalist, containing a correction to an article he wrote 15 years ago about a Macau casino fire. The correction? Only 4 words. You missed the rain. A tea house in Shongwan suddenly renovated. Rumor says it was empty for a decade, yet never sold, never condemned, and somehow never dusted. And inside, a table, 2 chairs, and a pen. That's all. No security, no cameras, no staff, just a space, left waiting, maybe for Chau, maybe for the person who understands what he left behind. Because Chau's endgame wasn't survival, it was substitution. A life so carefully withdrawn that it could be stepped into, piece by piece, by others. And whether or not anyone ever sits in that chair, the structure remains. Because Chau's real creation wasn't a criminal empire. It was a system of influence, sustained not by violence or visibility, but by memory and design, a kind of ghost architecture. Many people still believe Chau is alive, living quietly in southern Europe. Others say he died in 1992, buried under a different name. A few claim he visits Hong Kong once a year, never on the same day, never in the same place. Just a figure glimpsed in reflection, a silhouette by the water. So what do you think? Gone or watching? And what would he say if he could? Maybe nothing. Maybe just a familiar phrase. Hot water reveals the leaf, and then he'd vanish again, just as gently. Because that was always his way. Wind down begins here. The city breathes at night in the way only old cities do. Slowly, deliberately, with a hum that comes not from traffic, but from time. The harbor lights blur in the moisture hanging in the air. Windows blink quietly across the skyline like tired eyes refusing to sleep. And somewhere out there, behind a window, no one notices, a man finishes his tea, places the cup down, and closes a book. No name on the cover, no author listed, just a single gold coin tucked between the final pages. This is how things end for Chau. Not with arrest or betrayal or bullets, but with a whisper and a long exhale. With streets still standing, with stories still mutating, with one more step taken beyond the edge of what people remember and into the quiet place where memory begins to fold itself inward. He's not the echo anymore. He's the silence after. So let that silence settle now. Let the breath slow. Let the lights of Kowloon soften into mist. Let the footfalls of a man in tailored shoes fade into the back of your thoughts, like a dream you're not supposed to chase. And when the night gets especially quiet, and the city seems to pause between thoughts, maybe you'll feel it, that sensation that something once passed here, something quiet, something exact, someone who never needed to be seen to be understood. Good night. Years pass, and Hong Kong changes. The skyline grows sharper, the accents blur, and the city begins preparing for a handover that feels more like an unspoken threat than a celebration. 1997 is approaching. The Union Jack flutters with less certainty. Bankers sweat quietly behind glass. Street vendors trade gossip for facts, and in this new tide, the name Chau has all but evaporated, but traces remain if you know where to look. A shipping manifest lists a company called East Pearl Holdings. No employees, no contact number. Yet customs officers wave its containers through with an odd kind of reverence. A former gambling den in Jordan is now a bookstore. Independent, quaint, known for stocking rare poetry collections. The owner? A soft-spoken man named Mr. Lamb who once served tea at Chau's old tea house. He never mentions the past, but when you pay in cash, he nods like he knows exactly what you're not saying. In Macau, a boutique hotel changes hands quietly. No press, no ribbon cutting, but the first suite on the top floor is always reserved, always prepaid, always empty. That's the shape Chau has taken now. Not presence, but pattern. He isn't seen. He's felt. In the way people behave just a little better when walking past a certain alley. In the way a mid-level customs official delays an inspection by exactly 23 minutes on a rainy Tuesday, because his father once told him a story about a man named Chau and a mango crate that wasn't what it seemed. This is legacy in its purest form. And yet, he's not quite done. Somewhere in southern Spain, in a seaside town too small for maps but large enough for secrets, there's a villa carved into a hillside. From the outside, it looks like something a minor poet might retire to. Simple stone walls, wild rosemary, and a crooked mailbox that bears no name. But inside, a walk-in closet with 10 identical jackets, a drawer of old Hong Kong ID cards, and a study lined with bound ledgers, their spines worn smooth, their pages filled with hand-drawn maps, call logs, and lists of names. He's still watching, still curating, because even in self-imposed exile, Chau believes in maintenance. Systems decay, networks tangle. And so, once a year, always in March, he opens a briefcase, unfolds a map of Hong Kong, and updates the pressure points where power shifted, where trust collapsed, who owes what, and to whom, and most importantly, who's pretending not to remember him, because forgetfulness is dangerous, not to Chau, but to them. He begins writing letters, not many, not long, just enough to let certain people know the weather is still being watched. One goes to a Macau accountant who's begun pocketing more than he was told to. It arrives in the form of a postcard. No return address, just a photo of a watch. The caption reads, "Time audits loyalty. The accountant returns the extra money, plus interest. Another letter reaches a police inspector in Kowloon whose daughter is engaged to a man with too many names. The letter simply says, "Dinner should never come with risk." The engagement is quietly called off. Many people still believe Chau built a kind of phantom ledger, a document so encrypted and scattered that no one could ever find the full version. But everyone suspected they were listed on it. Some say it was stored in a safety deposit box in Zurich. Others claim it was hidden inside a cassette tape buried in a garden in Fanling. So what do you think? Digital myth or analog masterpiece? Back in Hong Kong, his name has been sanitized by time. The old cops retire. The new ones shrug. Historians mark him as influential in certain informal economies and move on. But there's one officer, Inspector Chau, who remembers. He joined the force in 1985, was fresh-faced, idealistic, allergic to bribes. He'd heard of Chau, of course. Everyone had. But he never saw him. Not until one night in 1989, at a gas station in Tycoon, where a man in a windbreaker bought 2 bottles of water and a box of sugarcane candy, paid in exact change, and nodded once before disappearing into a car with no license plate. Years later, Chau still keeps that sugarcane wrapper, folded, pressed flat, filed away in a box labeled unsolved. Not because it's evidence, but because it's proof of a moment that no one else believes happened. That's how Chau survives now, as punctuation, a name that makes people stop, squint, remember to behave. Not because they fear him, but because the city does. Even the 14K, fractured, bolder, louder, still refers to him occasionally. Not in meetings, but in warnings. Don't play smart unless you want a coin on your pillow. It's just an expression, but no one tests it. Because no one knows for sure whether Chau still has reach. Even Benny, living in Thailand now, running a modest import business, isn't sure. He hasn't heard from Chau in years. But once a month, on the same date, a courier drops off a red envelope. No note. Just a clean sum of cash. Always the exact amount needed to cover rent, staff, and supplies. Nothing extra, nothing missing. That's Chau's way. Precision, not generosity. Benny never tries to write back. He just nods, thanks the courier, and tells his workers, "That's from an old friend. Best not to ask his name." And so the engine continues, running not on oil or fire, but on ritual, on loyalty, on memory. And Chau? He sits by the sea, watches ships pass, sips coffee he doesn't sweeten, and waits, not for trouble, but for proof that what he built was never about money or reputation. It was about controlling silence, and in that silence, he still lives. The ocean doesn't announce itself. It just arrives, one wave, then another, until the whole coastline forgets where dry land began. Chau has become that kind of presence now. No longer a man. Not really. More like an undertow, but even tides revisit old shores. It's 1991. A decade has passed since Chau first dealt in counterfeit Rolexes and red envelopes. The city he once ruled by suggestion now roars with ambition. Skyscrapers grow overnight. Deals are made in English, broken in Mandarin, and patched in Cantonese. And somewhere amid all this noise, Chau sends a signal, a simple one, a watch. Sent to a man who used to sweep the back rooms of the old Kowloon casino. Inside the watch, no gears, no ticking. Just a folded note beneath the empty face. It's time again. That message sparks a ripple, not a firestorm. Chau never worked in flames, but a quiet stir. Phone calls without introductions, old numbers coming back into service, small shops cleaning their signs. One even reopens with the same name as before, Blue Crane Tea House. No one says his name. They never do, but they know. He's checking the wires. And not just in Hong Kong. In Bangkok, A shipment route is quietly reactivated. Not drugs, not weapons, just space. Clean, legal containers moved by people who don't ask what rides inside. In Singapore, a lawyer receives a payment for an old case he thought long forgotten. The client listed? Mr. Lamb, a name Chau used once, back when he still rode in taxis. And in Spain, where Chau now spends his days sipping espresso and feeding stray cats, a new guest arrives at his villa. It's not Benny, it's not an associate, it's a boy. 17, nervous. From Macau. Introduced by a note, carried across borders, hand-delivered by a mute courier. The boy bows, says nothing. Chau pours tea, says only why now. The boy replies, because I'm tired of noise. Chau nods, and a new cycle begins. He doesn't train the boy, not directly. That's not how his system works. Instead, he gives him a journal. Blank, leather-bound, no instructions. The boy opens it and sees a single line written in the top corner of the first page. Observe, record, disappear, because that's how Chau was built, and it's how he'll echo. Meanwhile, back in Hong Kong, people are whispering again, not about Chau, about patterns. A courier who delivers packages with no addresses. A seafood vendor whose shipping license never expires. A series of red envelopes left at a hospital foundation. Always the exact amount needed for a child's surgery. The city shrugs, adjusts. It always does. But underneath, the old heartbeat returns. Even the triads, torn, tattooed, and tired, begin speaking in softer tones, because something is back. Not loud, not visible, just present. One of the old lieutenants, now retired and working in a warehouse, says it best over tea. You know it's him, he mutters, because the chaos gets polite again. And that's all Chau ever wanted. Order without ownership. He wasn't building an empire. He was teaching the city how to walk without tripping. But not everyone learns. One crew tries to muscle in on a protection circuit that was once his. They demand rent from a wet market vendor who used to cook Chau's lunch. The next morning, they find every stall in the market closed. Shuttered. Silent. A note hangs on the entrance. This area remembers. No violence, no threat, just reminder. And so the crew backs off, because fear never truly protected Chau. Memory did. Elsewhere, Chau starts burning things. Not in anger, in closure. Old ledgers. Letters never sent. A photograph of his mother, taken on the balcony with a smile that he never quite replicated. He feeds them one by one into a ceramic dish, lights them with a match, and watches the smoke rise. He's not erasing, he's releasing, because the future he wants doesn't carry weight. It floats, and that means unburdening. He cancels the safety deposit box in Zurich. He sells the villa in Naples. He even donates an old pen to a museum in Lisbon under the label, belonged to a traveler, circa unknown. It draws little attention, which is exactly the point. Many people still think Chau's final move was setting up a network of ghost foundations. Non-profits with no buildings, no staff, but bank accounts that keep paying scholarships, hospital bills, and shipping fees in random parts of Southeast Asia. Some call it laundering, others call it penance. So what do you think? Final play or final gift? Back in Spain, the boy is learning. He no longer asks questions. He just watches. And Chau, older now, thinner, slower, begins walking shorter distances. But he still wears clean shoes, still takes tea at the same time each morning, still writes names down in tiny notebooks no one else ever sees. And one day, quietly, he disappears again. Not into death, just into distance. Leaves the villa unlocked. Leaves a cup on the table. Leaves the coin. And when the boy returns from town, there's no note. Just a phrase carved lightly into the edge of the desk. When the noise starts again, teach silence. No funeral, no eulogy. Just wind over the cliffs. And in Hong Kong, the systems continue. The city forgets his face, but not his shape. Deals are still cut at quiet tables. Red envelopes still change the course of lives. And once a year, in a shop with no name, a man leaves a gold coin in a teacup and walks away before the steam fades. Some say it's Chau, others say it's the boy. Most don't ask, because in a city that moves too fast to remember, some memories walk slower than sound. At some point, the legend begins to breathe on its own. By the mid-1990s, the name Chau no longer needs a person to support it. It floats, untethered, like incense in a still room, faint but unmistakable. You don't see him, you don't hear him, but if you've spent enough time in the right corners of Hong Kong, you recognize the temperature change when he's near, and yet Chau is long gone, or at least he should be. There's no record of him entering or leaving any country in the last 5 years. His former haunts, those old tea houses and ghost addresses, have been bought, sold, or painted over. Even Benny, now comfortably retired in Chiang Mai, hasn't received a red envelope in months. "I think he's done," Benny says over mango sticky rice one night, but even as he says it, he checks his watch, an old gold Omega that never quite keeps perfect time, gifted to him decades ago by a man who never needed to ask what time it was. Across the city there are ripples again. Not earthquakes, just tremors. A high-ranking customs official in Guangzhou receives a call with no voice. Just a recorded sound of a kettle whistling. He cancels a shipment inspection scheduled for next week. In Singapore, an old triad lieutenant who once betrayed a debt arrangement wakes to find his garden trampled, not destroyed, just walked through. There's a gold coin on his doorstep. No note. And in Hong Kong, a local charity suddenly receives an anonymous donation large enough to buy an entire floor in a new children's hospital wing. The donor name? No need. Whispers reignite. He's back, but not fully, not publicly, more like a signal flare. Bright, brief, meant only for those with the eyes to interpret it. Because Chau never returns to reclaim a throne. He returns to correct a vibration. And this time, that correction comes in the form of a man named Mr. Feng. Feng is new money. Loud money. The kind of gangster who buys a nightclub before buying insurance. His men wear sunglasses indoors, speak in shouts, and hand out business cards that say consultant on one side and solutions on the other. He starts muscling in on a protection circuit in Sham Shui Po, one of Chau's oldest zones, now technically neutral, but still remembered. He installs cameras, harasses vendors, demands tribute. It's 1995, and most of the old guard has either died, gone straight, or forgotten how to sharpen a knife. So who's gonna stop him? No one at first, until he tries to close a noodle stall owned by a quiet man named Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee is no one important, except he once made tea for Chau. Every Tuesday, for 5 years. The day after Feng's men ransack his stall, Mr. Lee finds a red envelope under his doormat. Inside, 3 photos, one of Feng's car, one of Feng's brother, and one of a gold coin on a mahjong table. Mr. Lee says nothing, but he reopens the next day. The stall has a new sign. House special. Memory noodles. 2 days later, Feng's car is stolen, then returned, perfectly clean, but missing only the back seat. A week after that, Feng himself receives an envelope. No message, just a silver spoon, bent slightly in the middle. He leaves Hong Kong within the month. No police involved, no threats made, just reminders. Because Chau doesn't punish, he curates pressure. Many people still believe this entire sequence was orchestrated by Chau's student, the boy from Macau. Now, a man. Still nameless, still faceless, but the signs are there. Soft corrections, clean silence, calculated absences. Some say he carries 2 phones and speaks only when necessary. Others say he's just a rumor perpetuated by those who miss the clarity Chau once brought to a chaotic city. So what do you think? A true heir, or just a well-trained shadow? Regardless, the style is unmistakable. One night, Benny receives a package, no return address. Inside, A blank journal, leather-bound, same brand Chau once gifted to his protégés. Same faint scent of sandalwood, tucked inside the front cover. A note. You were always the only voice I trusted. Keep watching. No signature, but Benny doesn't need one. He just folds the note, sets the journal on his shelf, and pours himself tea. No sugar. No words. Because some silences deserve to be kept. Elsewhere in the city, the economy is booming. People are planning for the handover. Businesses are pivoting. The triads are splitting. Some going corporate, others dissolving into louder, riskier games. Violence begins to spike in new places, clumsier hands on the wheel, and yet, there's still order. In certain streets, extortion doesn't happen. In certain ports, inspectors are still careful. And in certain buildings, those old ones with rusted gates and mailboxes filled with folded flyers, the light bulb in the hallway still gets replaced exactly on time. No one knows who's paying the bill, but it's never late. That's Chau, or rather, the ghost of his structure. His true creation wasn't fear. It wasn't power. It wasn't wealth. It was continuity. He built an operating system of behavior, one that sustains itself through tiny rituals, inherited phrases and instincts passed hand to hand like chopsticks at dinner. Don't sit with your back to the door. Don't speak when the kettle whistles. Leave the last dumpling. Someone always arrives late. Small things, harmless on their own. But together, a map. One you follow if you want to stay safe or stay useful. And while Chau himself may be somewhere far away, older, thinner, wearing clothes that don't wrinkle and shoes that don't squeak, his design never left because Chau never needed a monument. He built habits, and those last longer than stone. It's 1996, and the city is humming in a new key, half anticipation, half dread. The handover looms like fog on the horizon. British suits are being folded into boxes. Chinese briefcases arrive on flights with no public manifest. The streets feel familiar, but the air feels thinner. Hong Kong is rehearsing for a future it hasn't agreed to yet. And through this strange choreography, Chau's rhythm persists. Not openly, not loudly, but unmistakably. Because while politicians argue about sovereignty and slogans, Chau's people prepare the ground. Mei Lin, now a logistics consultant, retired to Taiwan, begins transferring ownership of several discrete shipping lanes to a network of shell firms headquartered in Mauritius. She never uses names, just initials. The papers arrive sealed, notarized, and time-stamped with perfect indifference. Tai, the ex-Marine police whisperer, now runs a flower import company. But every so often, a shipment of lilies to Hong Kong arrives a day early, flagged only by a subtle mark on the crate. Those crates never reach a florist, but they always end up exactly where they're supposed to. And Benny has grown tired. He still gets the occasional envelope, still receives the silent updates, but he no longer wants to manage. He wants peace. He wants to know that the machinery will run without oil, without checking, without him. So one afternoon, he writes a letter. It's short. If you're still watching, stop. It worked. You won. He doesn't expect an answer. But 3 weeks later, a postcard arrives from Portugal. No stamp. No name. Just a photo of a cliffside tea house, wind curling over the sea. On the back, one sentence. Then walk away with your hands in your pockets. And Benny does, because the machine works now. And that machine? It's not powered by phones or bribes or fear. It's powered by consistency. There's a market in Kowloon where none of the stalls ever open past 8 p.m. That's because, 30 years ago, a young man once asked Chau why he always closed early. Chau had replied, "The city doesn't need you after dark. Sleep makes money sharper." So they still close early. Not because they're told to, because they remember. There's a taxi depot in Mong Kok, where drivers always double-check their routes before picking up tourists. Why? because a driver once lost a fare and got it back 2 weeks later, returned by a man in a suit who left an envelope on the dashboard with 2 words. This time, that story made the rounds. Now everyone checks twice. That's Chau's real empire, correction through memory, and the city, facing handover, hyperdevelopment, and 1,000 new players who mistake Flash for control, needs that correction more than ever, which is why, in one corner of Sai Ying Pun, something old begins again. A small tea house opens. No sign, no menu. Inside, a single table. One chair always left empty. The servers don't speak unless spoken to. The bill always comes in a red envelope. No one pays by card. Everyone arrives knowing why they're there, even if they pretend they don't. Because the place isn't about tea. It's about permission. People come to ask quiet favors, or to undo loud ones. One man leaves an apology letter for a friend he betrayed in 1981. Another leaves a donation to repay a debt he was never asked to settle. A woman visits every year on her father's death anniversary, leaves a single mango, and walks away without saying a word. No one manages this place, no one owns it, but it runs, because Chau built it once, and someone rebuilt it again. Many people believe this second tea house is a tribute. Others think it's a test, a way to identify those who still believe in the old codes. Some say it's how the second circle recruits new members now. So what do you think? Tribute or trigger? Meanwhile, across the water, Macau begins to shift. Casinos expand. Triads jostle. New money bleeds in from Guangdong and vanishes just as quickly across baccarat tables and under silent floors. But behind the scenes, the same hand steadying the cards, not visibly, just enough. A hotel changes its reservation system to run manual checks on any name older than 60. A freight elevator gets rerouted to a private floor with no listing. A security camera is adjusted, 2 degrees, just enough to capture what used to be a blind spot. No one says Chau is back, but the room has that feeling again, like something is aware. Still, not everything survives untouched. One of the old network nodes collapses. A courier in Manila is arrested. Too loud, too modern, too eager to impress. The press gets hold of a half-burned ledger. No names. But a few whispers begin swirling again. The ICAS opens an inquiry into long-term embedded financial irregularities. They don't name anyone, but the tone of their language? It's familiar, like they're looking for someone they suspect was once there. Not to arrest, just to confirm. But Chau left no fingerprints, and now even his silhouettes are fading. Because in the final stage of his plan, the only thing left for Chau to remove is himself. Not just physically, historically. He begins triggering deletion protocols. 3 shell companies dissolve in 24 hours. 1 in Panama, 1 in the Seychelles, 1 in Vancouver. A bank account in Geneva is drained, its contents converted into 5 anonymous cashier's checks, mailed to 5 different countries with no explanation. An old hard drive is microwaved. A ledger, bound in leather, unmarked, is left in a safety deposit box under the name H.K. Lee. The key? Mailed to a university archivist in Lisbon with a single instruction. Don't read, just store. And finally, Chau deletes a phone number from a hidden file in an old laptop. The number is Benny's. Because that chapter is closed now. Not out of betrayal, but out of completion. This isn't a fall. It's a descent. Controlled, slow, chosen. Because Chau isn't dying. He's erasing the need to be remembered. And when the clock strikes midnight on June 30th, 1997, as Hong Kong's sky fills with ceremony and cautious pride, as the British flag folds and the Chinese one rises, a man in Portugal pours himself tea. No sugar, no sound, just the weight of knowing he finished something that was never meant to have a name. The transfer of power is seamless, at least on television. The ceremony is drenched in symbolism. Umbrellas unfurling, dignitaries in matching suits, a stage dressed in red and gold. Cameras linger on the flags, on the handshakes, on the mist that hovers over Victoria Harbor like stage smoke. to the world. This is an ending. But for Chau, it's a punctuation mark, not a full stop, just a quiet comma in a sentence only a few still understand. In a dim flat above a noodle shop in Central, a radio crackles. It's tuned to the government feed, narrating each step of the handover with robotic clarity. The man sitting beside it, Mr. Chung, once a fixer in Chau's transport chain, doesn't watch. He just listens, eyes closed, mouthing along to the words as though reciting a prayer he doesn't quite believe in. And on his desk, untouched but not unnoticed, sits an old envelope. Red, sealed, left by a silent courier 2 days before. He hasn't opened it. He doesn't need to, because when Chau sends something on the eve of history, the contents matter less than the timing. Cheung lights a cigarette and nods once, to no one in particular. He opens the window, lets the smoke rise into a city trying to pretend it's brand new. Elsewhere, Benny is asleep. Deep sleep. The kind you earn after letting go. His last red envelope came months ago, containing only a receipt for a prepaid burial plot on a quiet hill outside Chiang Mai. No flowers allowed, just a stone and a tree to shade it. He smiled when he read it, whispered, "Typical," and poured himself a final drink. No melancholy, just closure. In the new Hong Kong, the triads begin mutating. Some go legit, buying companies, attending networking events, using phrases like market disruption and synergy. Others implode, chasing too much too fast, addicted to chaos in a city that now charges a luxury tax on memory. But some adapt, not because they remember Chau, because they still operate in his shadow, like the man called Mock, mid-30s, educated abroad, skin too clean, suits too sharp. He runs a tech security firm, but insiders whisper he oversees arrangements in the new territories, disputes settled before courts hear them, shipments rerouted before customs notice. He's never met Chau, but he follows his rules. Never speak twice if once will do. Never sign anything unless it's in disappearing ink. Never sit with your back to a room where someone once cried. He keeps a coin on his desk, not gold, just brass, but he polishes it every morning. And when asked why, he shrugs. Old tradition, he says, but it's not his tradition. It's a whispered inheritance, and it reaches further than anyone suspects. In Manila, a battered tea house suddenly reopens under new management. The server doesn't speak Cantonese, but he places each teacup with the same two-finger rotation that Chau insisted on. An old man leaves a mango on the doorstep and walks away before the sun rises. In Vancouver, a community center receives an anonymous donation in the exact amount needed to replace a broken furnace. The receipt is addressed to Caretaker 4B. No such apartment exists, and in Lisbon, a university archivist opens a dusty envelope labeled H.K. Lee, hesitates, then files it away unopened, just as instructed. He doesn't know why, but something about the weight of the leather-bound book tells him to respect its silence. Chau's fingerprints are gone, but his architecture remains, and every so often, someone touches a thread he left behind and feels the vibration, a tiny shiver in the system, like the city remembering how to behave. One night, a local police inspector in Kowloon receives a tip about a planned weapons shipment through Aberdeen Harbor. No name, no source, just a fax. Handwritten. Blurry, but accurate. The bust leads to 4 arrests, no bloodshed. At the bottom of the fax, beneath the coordinates and codes, is a single line. "You're welcome. Sleep well." The inspector never tells anyone. He just changes his phone number the next day. In Portugal, Chau watches the news with the sound off. Always off. He sits on a bench overlooking the sea. A cat curls beside him, named only 11, because Chau claims that's how many times she's tried to leave but come back. He feeds her quietly, No eye contact, just companionship in parallel. The boy from Macau, now a man, sends postcards twice a year. No text, just images, a canal, a staircase, a mangosteen. Chau keeps them in a drawer labeled noise, not as insult, as reminder, because even silence needs context. Many people still argue about Chau's true legacy. Some academics say he destabilized the region's underworld by refusing to modernize. Others say he was a genius, replacing violence with etiquette, brutality with suggestion. A few whisper that he never really existed, that he was a composite myth, crafted by a generation of mid-level operators who needed something to believe in. So what do you think? Was Chau the last quiet architect in a world addicted to spectacle? Or just a man who refused to be translated into legend? In the end, the answer doesn't matter, because the story keeps playing, with or without him. And sometimes, when the wind hits the harbor just right, and the city's neon reflections ripple across the water in broken fragments, it feels like Hong Kong itself is winking, not because it remembers, but because it still listens. By 1998, Hong Kong has officially stepped into its post-handover era. Modern, reformatted, scrubbed for the international stage. But beneath the glass facades and investor luncheons, the city's heartbeat hasn't changed. It still pulses in alleyways, in second-floor tea shops where the landlord never raises the rent, in unspoken codes etched into routine. And somehow, Chau is still part of the rhythm, not in presence, in pattern. His legend becomes an operating system, an algorithm for quiet control. And just like outdated software that still somehow runs in the background, no one really knows how to uninstall him, or whether they even want to. His signature silence, the preference for pause over push, becomes a business model. There's a mid-level investor named Clara in Central, who structures her meetings around rituals borrowed from stories of Chau. Never sits until the client does. Orders jasmine tea before discussing numbers. Always brings a small envelope, even if it's empty. When asked why, she just says, "It resets the tone." Meanwhile, Mock, yes, that tech-savvy whisper broker from before, has become something of an enigma himself. He launches a non-profit focused on urban quietude, an intentionally vague mission statement that somehow attracts both retired gangsters and burnt-out CEOs. The group hosts no public events, holds no press conferences, and operates out of a space with no signage, just a stone sculpture of a cat sleeping. Inside, there's one framed quote, "Noise ages us, precision preserves." People swear they've seen Chau's student there. Older now, slower, wearing a gray linen suit and carrying a pen with no ink. But no one asks his name, because to speak, it is to acknowledge a ghost, and no one wants to admit they believe in those. Back in Portugal, Chau downsizes, moves to a smaller flat. Fewer books, less light. He walks the beach less often. Buys tea from a newer vendor who talks too much but has kind eyes. He keeps a notebook, one of the few things he still writes in. But the entries aren't about operations or money or control. They're observations. The ocean doesn't explain itself. Even cats look twice before eating what's too easy. Fear fades. Memory lingers. Sometimes he writes names. Most are crossed out. Not in malice, just closure. He's archiving his own influence, one forgotten whisper at a time. And still, the network breathes. In Jakarta, a shipping manifest vanishes before customs inspects it. A week later, an NGO receives a new generator, paid in full, invoice signed Caretaker 11. In Hanoi, a journalist investigating corruption receives an anonymous tip that leads to a major arrest. When she tries to trace the call, all she hears is kettle steam. In New York, a Chinatown elder dies. At his funeral, a man no one recognizes places a single gold coin in the incense bowl and walks away before the chanting ends. Whispers say Chau sent him. Others claim it was the student. But really, What's the difference anymore? Chau's blueprint has dissolved into muscle memory. Even among those who never knew him, his principles survive in behavior. A chef in Kowloon insists his kitchen run in silence during prep hours. A courier in Cebu refuses to carry anything marked with initials, not for fear, but for respect. A warehouse clerk in Busan always leaves his station clean, muttering, "Eyes might visit, even when feet don't." All of them act independently. None of them know each other, but all are part of a system Chau designed to function without him. That's the true art. Not command, but choreography. And in a world sprinting toward noise and velocity, Chau's legacy becomes the quiet counterweight. The black stone in the white room. The stillness others orbit around without knowing why. Of course, the modern world doesn't slow down for ghosts. Digital surveillance intensifies. Triads fragment further. New players with shiny tech and loud ambition try to upend old rhythms. But when they do, when they push too hard or ask the wrong question, a delay happens. Not a block, just a hiccup. Their permits stall. Their shipments get flagged. Their calls don't go through. And always, at the very edge of the glitch, is a trace of red, an envelope left on the wrong desk, a coin misfiled in a government drawer, a photo, blurry, old, showing a man sipping tea behind a curtain. These are not warnings. They are reminders. And by now, they need no explanation. Many people still ask whether Chau orchestrated all this, if the tendrils of his influence really stretch that far. But others insist the system is autonomous now, self-correcting. That Chau simply built a machine too elegant to fall apart, even without maintenance. So what do you think? Mastermind from the grave, or ghost in the machine? Either way, the result is the same. One night, a former money launderer turned monk walks the streets of Kowloon and whispers into the air. He never left, he just moved beneath the pavement. And somewhere in Portugal, a man finishes his tea. No smile, no sigh, just stillness. Because when your legacy is motionless, you never have to chase its echo. It arrives. In the twilight years of the 1990s, the city has grown louder, faster, and brighter. Neon signs pulse with relentless energy. Skyscrapers reach higher into the fog, and the hum of commerce drowns out the whispers of the past. Yet, amid the cacophony, Chau's influence remains a ghostly undercurrent, a steady tide beneath the crashing waves. He no longer intervenes directly. Instead, his legacy operates through habits, traditions, and subtle signals that ripple through Hong Kong's underworld and beyond. A nod here, a silence there, a red envelope left where it will be found but never traced. In an unassuming office overlooking the harbor, a young woman named Mei Lin, once Chau's trusted logistics coordinator, now runs an enterprise specializing in shipping compliance. She carries forward the lessons learned: discretion over drama, patience over power, and the quiet precision that shaped the network. Meanwhile, Tai, the ex-Marine police officer with an impeccable memory, supervises border operations in Macau, quietly smoothing over disruptions with a few choice words and an even quieter presence. Benny, now well into his 60s, has settled into a peaceful life, occasionally receiving discreet updates that assure him the system remains intact. Even the boy from Macau, now a man trained in silence and strategy, operates from the shadows, ensuring the legacy endures without fanfare or exposure. Historical fact. The late 1990s and early 2000s saw the triads adapt to changing political and economic landscapes, often transitioning from overt criminal enterprises to more subtle, sophisticated operations. Many figures from the previous decades faded into the background, leaving behind structures that continued to function quietly. Chau's approach to power, rooted in influence rather than force, serves as a blueprint for these new dynamics. It's a system that values subtlety, longevity, and control over spectacle. In one particular neighborhood, a restaurant's owner recounts a story passed down from her grandfather about a man who could make entire streets run smoothly with nothing but a look and a few quiet words. Though she never met him, his presence is felt in every orderly transaction and peaceful evening. Many still debate whether Chau was a criminal mastermind or a misunderstood strategist who sought stability in chaos. Some say he was both. So what do you think? Did Chau shape a criminal empire or craft a lasting lesson in quiet resilience? As the new millennium dawns, Hong Kong continues to evolve, its skyline forever changing. Yet beneath the surface, in the rhythm of everyday life, Chau's legacy pulses softly, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful influence is the one unseen, and somewhere, far from the city's relentless noise, Chau's story settles into peaceful silence. As the years turn, Hong Kong's underworld shifts beneath the surface like tectonic plates, unseen yet undeniable. The new millennium brings a digital age where information flows faster than cash, and the old codes are tested against algorithms and encrypted networks. But Chau's legacy, rooted in patience, subtlety, and precision, proves remarkably resilient. His influence is less about control now and more about structure, the invisible framework holding together a sprawling, complex city where tradition and modernity collide. In quiet offices and smoky back rooms, the rituals he once codified persist. The gentle tap on a teacup, the deliberate pause before speaking, the red envelope given without expectation, all echoes of a system designed not for headlines, but for survival. Mei Lin oversees international logistics, ensuring shipments navigate ever stricter borders with seamless efficiency. Tai acts as a silent guardian of customs, reading between the lines and anticipating moves before they happen. Benny enjoys retirement, content in the knowledge that the foundations they built continue to support more than just crime. They uphold a fragile order. Elsewhere, the boy from Macau, now a man with no name but many faces, moves through the city's shadows, ensuring the balance remains. He neither seeks power nor recognition. His mission is stewardship. Historical fact: the early 2000s witnessed increased globalization and technology integration in illicit economies, requiring adaptability and discretion more than brute force. Traditional organized crime had to evolve or dissolve. In this environment, Chau's approach, favoring invisibility over dominance, becomes a model for sustainable influence. His legacy teaches that control isn't about presence, but about anticipation and adaptation. Some say the city still remembers him in gestures, the way a delivery is made, the timing of a payment, the unspoken agreements that keep peace without violence. Others claim he's long passed, leaving only myths behind. So what do you think? Was Chau the last true architect of a disappearing empire, or simply the first to understand that empires are meant to dissolve? The city marches forward, neon lights flicker, and the harbor swells with ships carrying endless cargo. Yet, within this flow, the calm currents Chau created persist, guiding the tides in unseen ways. And in a small room, lined with books and memories, a man closes his journal, sets his pen down, and lets the quiet settle, knowing his story isn't about endings, but continuations. By the mid-2000s, Hong Kong has transformed into a global metropolis, a nexus of finance, culture, and commerce. Skyscrapers touch the sky, and the city pulses with energy from dawn till well past midnight. Yet beneath this modern facade lies the enduring framework Chau laid decades ago. a lattice of subtle influence and silent agreements. His era, while faded, still echoes in unexpected ways. The code of silence, the gestures of respect, the rituals of discretion, they all serve as invisible threads, weaving the social fabric together. In quiet corners, the older generation still retells stories, fragments of a man who commanded more power through absence than many did through presence. His was a legacy not of chaos, but of calm control. Mei Lin continues her work with quiet dignity, overseeing a network that spans continents, ensuring that the machinery runs smoothly without drawing attention. Tai, though older now, remains the unseen hand keeping watch at border crossings. Benny lives quietly, occasionally smiling at memories too complex to explain. The boy from Macau has become a shadowy figure in Hong Kong's labyrinth, guiding new actors with the same patient wisdom Chau once imparted. Even as new forces rise, digital syndicates, international conglomerates, and young gangsters craving notoriety, the lessons Chau embedded into the city endure. They remind those who listen that real power often lies not in spectacle, but in subtlety, patience, and the art of being unseen. Many still debate the true nature of Chau's empire. Was he a criminal kingpin, a strategic visionary, a ghost story told to keep order? The answer is elusive, much like the man himself. So what do you think? Is Chau's legacy a blueprint for survival, or a cautionary tale about the price of invisibility? The city's lights shimmer on Victoria Harbor, casting reflections that ripple and dance, a metaphor for the balance between seen and unseen forces at play. And somewhere beyond the noise and neon, Chau's story continues, not as a legend shouted aloud, but as a quiet presence felt only by those who know where to look. The final years of Chau's story unfold like a whispered secret, carried on the winds that sweep through Hong Kong's harbor, touching rooftops, winding through alleys, and settling softly into the city's pulse. The man who once navigated the shadowy intersections of power, silence, and memory now exists largely as an idea, a quiet guardian of order amidst relentless change. He no longer moves among the living, but inhabits the habits, the codes, the silences of a city he shaped with precision and care. His presence lingers in the unspoken agreements between businessmen and brokers, in the cautious nods exchanged at midnight, in the delicate balance between loyalty and discretion. The networks he built hum softly in the background, independent, self-sustaining, and resilient. They operate without fanfare, guided by principles Chau instilled: patience over haste, subtlety over spectacle, and above all, the power of memory. A red envelope appears on a vendor's stall in Sham Shui Po. A familiar gold coin is found on the counter of a quiet tea house. A whispered phrase circulates through the streets: the house always wins. But now, the house belongs not to a man, but to an enduring system, a living legacy that transcends any single individual. And as night falls over the harbor, the city exhales, a slow, measured breath, carrying with it the echoes of a man who mastered silence and made it his kingdom. Good night. The night deepens, and the city's noises fade into a gentle hush. Lights from distant windows twinkle like stars caught in the web of Hong Kong's skyline, each one a story, a secret, a life quietly unfolding. Somewhere, a soft breeze carries the scent of incense and salt water, mingling with the distant rhythm of waves lapping against the harbor's edge. In this stillness, imagine Chau, no longer a man chasing fortune or power, but a presence folded into the city's breath. His legacy is not in statues or headlines, but in the silent contracts between people, in rituals that keep chaos at bay. It's in the quiet nods, the carefully folded envelopes, the memory of a man who never needed to shout to be heard. Let the tension of the day slip away. Let your breath slow. Feel the weight of history settle gently, like dust on an old wooden table. There's comfort in knowing that even in a city that never truly sleeps, there is room for peace, for order born of silence. So as you drift now, carried on the soft hum of nighttime, remember, power need not roar. It can whisper. Influence can be invisible. And sometimes, the greatest strength lies in knowing when to step back, to let the city carry its own stories forward. Sleep well. The night is long, but it listens.